I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
Hello, and happy Tuesday. Greetings, comrades. Welcome to the Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sundays. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble, and welcome back, guys. We do have interesting stories to discuss tonight. I'm sure you guys you say that every time, but tonight is a little bit different. Oh my God. If you did not see that RFK Jr. Interview, I don't know what to tell you, but we're going to get into that tonight. I think he definitely did himself even more damage there, if I were to say so. But I think a lot of people are going to be talking about that for quite a while. I also have an update in reference to one of the things that was said during that interview last night that I'm going to show you as well. Because I have a lot to discuss, I know I usually give shout outs in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because I want to make sure I cover everything. Depending on what time I end, and if you guys want to, maybe we can do call in tonight. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. But I figured you might want to call in tonight. And if we do it tonight, then we wouldn't do it Thursday. But let's just go ahead and start off by giving a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sabby patrons. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies. Don't forget about those members as well. All of their names are featured here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Let's give it up for Nora, Willie, and Jean. We call them newbies over here. They are in the house. Okay. We've got a lot to discuss tonight. I will say, I am going to end with a good news story. Shout out to Professor Wolf for this. Every now and then, I think we do need to hear some good news. And so I'm glad about this. What's up, Case? Case study in the house. What's up, Case? Shout out to Case. I saw you wearing the Sabby t-shirt during the RBN Labor Summit. What's up, Case? You guys give props to Case Study QB. I don't know where I would be without Case because he actually clips a lot of the news stories that you see me cover on this channel. So I don't know where a lot of us would be without Case Study QB because we really don't feel like sitting there watching news all day just to clip it. So what's up? Shout out to Case. Let me go ahead and get into that thumbnail there. So I'm going to go ahead and share so we can discuss these stories we have tonight. Tonight, we are discussing Jimmy DORE versus RFK Jr. If you did not see that interview last night, You're going to hear about it tonight. Oh my God. Yeah, I have a lot to say, and I'm going to focus on two particular subjects in particular. One is being healthcare, and the other one is Israel and Palestine. So I'm going to dive into those tonight in reference to that interview. I'm also going to discuss Professor Richard Wolff. Great news. Yay! I said every time, and then we need some good news. So Professor Richard Wolff, always doing like the economic update. Usually it's with news that's not so great in reference to the economy, etc. But this particular story is actually good news, and it may inspire you as well. We're also going to discuss DSA shifts politics. What does this have to do with AOC and DSA? And what also, I should have put Cornel West up there as well. This also has a little bit to do with Cornel West as well. But overall, there's something I need to tell you about DSA and the direction that they are going in. And we're also going to discuss the Niger coup alert. You may have heard a little bit about this. You'll see that Macron is also there. I'm going to explain to you how this involves France as well. You got to hear the story is crazy. But I think this is one of those stories that may get slept on. And I don't want people to sleep on this story, because I think this is very telling for what may happen going forward in reference to foreign policy, not just in countries in Africa, but globally. So I think we need to pay attention to that particular story. So we're going to get into those. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with this first story coming out of Niger. Now, for those who are not aware, there was a coup recently in Niger. This is getting a lot of attention in reference to international news. I think CNN mentioned something about it briefly. But first and foremost, I want to kind of break down what this is about, because I don't want people to get confused. And you guys know how I am when it comes to foreign policy. I want to make sure I can explain things in a way that everybody can understand, because not everybody is paying attention to these things. But to start out, I do want to say, and I forgot to put this there, but shout out to Danny Haifong, because he said the U.S. sent 1,000 troops to Niger after a coup took out their preferred leader. Now, that is going to be very important when we get into this story, because we've seen this happen before, right? We saw this happen in Libya, other countries as well. So I wanted to mention that so you understand the depth of this. So let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of background here. Niger coup, simple guide to what's happening. Now, just keep in mind, this is the BBC. BBC 1, BBC 2, BBC 3, BBC 4, BBC 5. President Bazoum was the first elected leader to succeed another in Niger since independence in 1960. I'm going to make this bigger, because I did notice on the screen it looks kind of small. Okay, there we go. In 1960, now his captors have suspended the country's constitution and installed General Abdurrahman as head of state. Niger is a key part of the African region known as the Sahel, a belt of land that stretches from the Atlantic Sea to the Red Sea. The area is plagued by jihadists and beset by military regimes. Western nations have looked to Niger as a bulwark against further disorder and spreading Russian influence in the region, but that turned out to be short-lived. Now, it's important that you hear that, because, of course, yes, this does involve Russia in some way, of course, as well. So I just want you to understand the full scope of what this is really about. Why is it important? As the largest country in West Africa, it is a bellwether state in many ways. Politically, it had been seen as an example of relative democratic stability in recent years, while its neighbors, Mali and Burkina Faso, had already succumbed to military coup. Strategically, it hosts French and U.S. military bases and is seen as a key partner in the fight against Islamic insurgents. Now, I'm going to pause here for just a second. I would argue those bases shouldn't be there to begin with. We've seen this before. We have military bases there to protect the country against, Islamic radicals, extremists, etc. We've heard this multiple times before. They're also going to stress the importance of having those bases there in order to protect some form of democracy. Now, where have we heard that before? Libya, right? Let's continue. In fact, the U.S. State Department describes Niger as important as a linchpin for stability in Sahel and a reliable counterterrorism partner against various Islamic groups linked to either the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. Doesn't this sound familiar to you guys? Here we go again. Economically, this is important. It is rich in uranium, producing 7% of all global supplies. The radioactive metal looms so large in the country's economy that one of the grandest thoroughfares in the capital, Niamey, is named for the Avenue de Uranium. However, Niger's people consistently rank as having the lowest standards of living in the world. Now, here's a country that's economically rich in uranium, but they're proceeding to inform you that the people there have one of the lowest standards of living anywhere in the world. Now, why is that? Once again, we have a country that is particularly rich in a certain resource, but the people there are neglected. The people there are poor. And that is because their resources have either been stolen or they've been exploited. Doesn't that sound familiar to you? Let's continue. Here's the Sahel region of Africa. So I want to show you the map so you can see where we're talking about here. You'll see Morocco, Western Sahara. You'll see Mali. There's Burkina Faso, and there's Niger. So Niger is right between Chad and Mali. Interesting, funny thing about Chad, I just want to point this out because people are really funny. There was actually a quiz where this reporter was questioning people on the street and they were asking them to name 5 countries in Africa. And one of the countries that everybody named was Chad. Chad. Anywho, moving on. Why did the coup happen? The Sahel region is a turbulent and unstable part of the world, and democracy is currently in retreat here. See what I meant about them explaining that we need to be there because of democracy? Similar to Libya, this is what they're trying to use as an excuse. Violent Islamic groups have gained ground by controlling territory and conducting attacks in the tri-border region between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. The mutinous soldiers in Niger have cited this worsening security situation as a reason for their uprising. Although Niger was handling the insurgencies far better than Mali and Burkina Faso before their own coups, the growing unrest has led some to believe that only harsh military crackdowns can solve the problem. Does that sound familiar? That also sounds familiar. If we're looking domestically, that reminds me of Cop City. The only way that we can solve this crime issue, the increase in crime, is to have more police. And not just more police, but militarized police. Same story over and over again. Hence the popular support that the coup seems to enjoy in some quarters. However, it is far clear that a military junta would have greater success in tackling the insurgents than the recently ousted government. The takeovers in neighboring countries have not made much difference. And then it goes on to say here, adding to the instability in the region, climate change is causing desertification to spread southwards from the Sahara into the Sahel. Experts say temperatures in the Sahel are rising faster than anywhere in the world. Now, keep in mind that was the BBC. But I want to show you another interpretation of what is happening in Niger. And we got to give shout out to Nico, by the way. Nico House has been crushing it. He's been doing these short clips through Hotspot. And so Nico is going to explain this, I think, in a narrative that you may not hear on mainstream media. He said France wants their puppet back in power so they can continue plundering Niger for its uranium. So that's another thing to mention, that France does depend on that uranium from this country. So People in this country are starting to rise up. We've been seeing this happen over the past couple of months where other countries in Africa are also like, no, we're not dealing with this Western influence and imperialism anymore. They're starting to rise up and say, we don't want you here. And why don't you let us keep our own resources and you go find your own? So let's go ahead and get into this clip here from Nico, because I think he does a really good job at explaining his side of this story. Listen to this.
So in case you missed the news, Niger has had a military coup, and I'm letting you know right now, before all the Western media tells you they want democracy back in Niger, let me tell you the real reason for this coup and why not all coups are created equally. This is Mohamed Bazoum, the former or current, depending on how you look at it, president of Niger. As you can see, he's a little bit cozy with Emmanuel Macron. This is important, and we're going to talk about it in a second. You see, Macron is actually the president of France, and 70% of France's electricity comes from nuclear power. Niger is the fourth largest producer of uranium in the world, and guess who predominantly mines their uranium? A French company called Areva. Guess whose company provides most of the nuclear power to France? Areva. Now, despite Niger basically being a French colony, their president basically being a puppet of Macron in France, only 1 in 7 people who live in Niger have power.
Pause right there. You see the difference? How they're taking resources from Niger to power their own country. Meanwhile, the people who actually live in Niger, only 1 in 7 of them have power. Imperialism. This is terrible. And it's not just Niger. This is just one example. There's other countries that have been dealing with this as well. So when people call these countries third world countries or poor countries, these countries are not poor. They're rich in resources. In fact, if you look all throughout countries in Africa, there's plenty of resources. The problem is the resources are stolen. They're taken from those countries. Let's continue.
Despite the majority of their number one resource, which provides power, going to France basically for free. So because of the president's loyalty to Macron and unwillingness to fight for Nigerians, people in Niger literally can't keep their lights on if they've ever had lights at all.
Pause right here before we continue. One of the things I told you guys a couple months ago when we were talking about social democracy, we were talking about countries in Europe that are able to offer benefits such as unlimited vacation, unlimited maternity leave, like everybody has healthcare, all those things. And I agree with all of those things. But one of the things that is often left out, and Second Thought really did a really great video about this, by the way. I don't know if you guys watch Second Thought, you should watch him. But he did a great video about this, explaining how one of the things that they do is, though they may not be exploiting the people necessarily in their European country, but they do tend to exploit people in the global South and also people in countries in Africa. And that's how they're able to do what they do. This is how France is able to just have, take the uranium from Niger and empower its country. And the people who are in Niger, most of them don't even have lights on. So even though you don't see the exploitation happening in those countries and everybody has all the universal policies, which I agree with those policies, you have to come up with a better way to implement them without exploiting people in other countries as if they don't matter. And that continues to happen. Colonialism is still alive and well. No, people are not still loading up, people from Africa and pulling them over on slave ships and making them slaves in the United States and other countries as well. But it's being done in a different way, and those people still have to struggle. Let's continue.
While France plunders Niger for its natural resources. And you're going to have plenty of Western media people and leaders from the Western world coming out and saying they want democracy in Niger. But let's not forget, this is the same US and France that overthrew Gaddafi in Libya, and we literally have open market slavery in Libya right now in 2023, and they haven't done anything about it because they don't.
Because see, that's what happens when the US tries to poke into another country and tries to tell them, they have democracy. Let's see what we can do here to protect their democracy. And then the people in Libya ended up worse off than they were after US intervention. And that's a common tale. It continues to happen. A lot of people don't talk about this. A lot of times when people bring up people like Barack Obama, they don't mention this either. They don't mention the fact that Libya basically had slave trade brought back because of U.S. intervention, when we would have been better off leaving them alone and letting them handle their own business. How would you like it if another country came to the United States and started overthrowing our democracy and telling us what to do? It's hard to fathom that sometimes. It's hard to fathom that because it doesn't happen. We have to try to start putting ourselves in their shoes. Let's continue. I'll go back a little bit because I cut Nico off like mid-sentence.
They haven't done anything about it because they don't care about democratically elected individuals unless they play for the team of the United States, France, and NATO. And you hear this talk of sanctions, and I'm thinking to myself, like, how much more can you sanction them? You're literally taking everything they have already, which is why the coup even happened. But I digress. All calls for Western involvement in Niger are only driven by profiteering and plundering. They don't give a damn about democracy. And if they did, they wouldn't be in the situation in Niger to begin with.
Well said. Well said, Nico. So yes, sanctions, as you can imagine, is also a part of this as well. I want to bring up this part here in reference to the resources. Richard hit it on the head. France has the fourth largest gold reserves, 2.436 tons, without a single gold mine in France. Mali, which was occupied by France, does not have any gold reserves in its bank, although it has 860 gold mines and produces 50 tons per year. How did France get all that gold? This is the same thing I said about the royal family when some people said I was being too harsh. My bad. But when King Charles was parading around and they had his coronation, and I said, look at all that stolen wealth. Because it's true. This is what they do. They take from these countries as if these people don't matter, as if they don't have any rights. Now, I want to give you an update in reference to this, and this is coming from Africa Archives. It says that France suspended aid to Niger after the coup. Niger suspended the export of gold and uranium to France. France will evacuate its nationals from Niger. So this was the right thing for Niger to do, to suspend the export of gold and uranium from France. I mean, like, you don't owe them anything. Now, this is not to say that France won't try to take it anyway. But I'm going to tell you something about that, something in reference to what they said may happen if they see their faces show up there again. Now, this clip here from Breakthrough News says Russia is family for Africa, declared the president of Burkina Faso at the Russia-African Summit in St. Petersburg. So I want to go ahead and play this clip. I think this is important for people to hear because it appears that they do consider Russia to be on their side. They consider Russia to be an ally. He goes on to say that Russia to them is like family. Listen to this.
On se sent en famille en ce sens que la Russie est une famille aussi pour l'Afrique.
Russia is a family for Africa too.
C'est une famille parce que nous avons la même histoire.
We are family because we have the same history.
La Russie a consenti d'énormes sacrifices pour libérer le monde du nazisme.
Russia made enormous sacrifices to free the world from Nazism during World War II.
Pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Les peuples africains, nos grands-pères, ont été déportés de force aussi pour aider l'Europe.
African people were also forcibly deported to help Europe get rid of Nazism.
À se débarrasser du nazisme. Nous partageons la même histoire en ce sens que nous sommes les peuples oubliés du monde.
We share the same history in the sense that we are the forgotten peoples of the world.
Qu'ils soient dans les livres d'histoire, dans les documentaires ou films, on tend donc à balayer le rôle prépondérant qu'a joué.
We tend to dismiss the key role played by Russia in Africa. He's referring to the history books.
De la Russie et de l'Afrique dans cette lutte contre le nazisme. Pour ce qui concerne le Burkina Faso, aujourd'hui nous sommes confrontés depuis plus de 8 ans à la forme de manifestation la plus barbare, la plus violente.
For more than 8 years, they've been confronted with barbaric forms of neo-colonialism and imperialism.
Du néocolonialisme, de l'impérialisme. l'esclavage qu'on tend encore à nous imposer.
You see that? Slavery continues to impose itself on us. Different forms, but still.
Nos dévanciers nous ont bien appris une chose. L'esclave qui n'est pas capable d'assumer sa révolte ne mérite pas que l'on s'apitoie sur son sort. Nous ne nous apitoyons pas sur nos sorts, on ne demande pas que quelqu'un s'apitoie sur notre sort.
Not asking for pity. We do not feel sorry for ourselves. We're not asking you to feel sorry for us.
Le peuple burkinabé a décidé de lutter contre l'île terroriste.
The people of Burkina Faso have decided to fight against terrorism in order to relaunch their
En
development.
mesure de relancer son développement. Dans cette lutte, des vaillants peuples, des vaillantes populations se sont engagées à prendre les armes face au terrorisme.
People have decided to take up arms in defense of terrorism. This we affectionately call the VDP of
Que
volunteers.
nous avons affectueusement appelé les VDP, des volontaires. Nous sommes surpris de voir les impérialistes traiter ces VDP de milices et de tout.
So what they are referring to, what the French people are referring to as militias, he's saying that they refer to those people as VDPs, the volunteers. So this is why it's important to hear the other side of the story.
C'est décevant parce qu'en Europe, lorsque des peuples prennent les armes pour défendre leur patrie, on les traite de patriotes.
Woo! He said in Europe, when people take up arms to defend their homeland, they're considered to be patriots. You guys see this? This is an important point to make because when you see other groups, whether it's in countries in Africa, Haiti, Middle East, etc., when they do that, they're called terrorists, they're called militias. They're not considered to be patriots, so to speak.
Mais là n'est pas le problème. Ce qui est le problème, c'est de voir des chefs d'État africains qui n'apportent rien à ces peuples qui se battent, mais qui chantent la même chose que les impérialistes en nous traitant de milices, en nous traitant donc d'hommes qui ne respectent pas les droits de l'homme.
They're calling them men that don't respect human rights. Which human rights are we talking about?
Droits de l'homme, parle-t-on. Nous nous offusquons contre cela et c'est honteux. Il faut que nous, chefs d'État africains, nous arrêtons de nous comporter donc en marionnettes qui dansent à chaque fois.
So he's calling out the African heads of states. He said they need to stop misbehaving and acting like puppets. I feel like you would never hear our politicians speak this way. You know, I feel like you would never hear them, say this about other politicians that we have, not the ones who are currently in office. Every time the imperialists pull the string.
Que les impérialistes tirent sur les ficelles. Hier, le président Vladimir Poutine a annoncé donc l'envoi de céréales en Afrique. Nous sommes bien contents.
That's another piece that a lot of people aren't mentioning. We talked about the grain, not renewing the grain deal. Vladimir Putin was not renewing that in reference to Ukraine. But here is a leader here from Burkina Faso explaining to you that Vladimir Putin actually is going to deliver grain to countries in Africa. And I haven't heard this really discussed on mainstream media. So this is why it's important to hear other sources of media.
Disons merci pour cela. Mais aussi, c'est un message passé à nos chefs d'État africains. Parce qu'au prochain forum, nous ne devrons pas venir ici sans avoir assuré, pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas la guerre, l'autosuffisance alimentaire de nos peuples. Nous devons prendre l'expérience de ceux qui ont pu déjà atteindre cela en Afrique, tisser de bonnes relations ici et tisser de meilleures relations avec la Fédération de Russie.
So he's talking about his people having food. He said the Russian Federation so that we can meet the needs of our people.
Pouvoir assouvir les besoins de nos populations. Gloire à nos peuples, dignité à nos peuples, victoire à nos peuples. La patrie ou la mort, nous vaincrons. Merci, camarades.
Okay, so you're probably not going to see that on mainstream media. And I do want to show a little bit here how one talked about the Niger coup. This video here says France denies plotting to intervene militarily in Niger as tensions rise in Sahel. Of course, they're going to deny it, but here we go.
Niger remains on the edge days after a successful military coup. Reports of evacuation of French citizens are now emerging from the African nation. Earlier pictures emerged of ousted President Mohamed Bazoum's meeting with Chadian President Mahamat Idris Deby. This is the 7th military takeover in less than 3 years in West and Central Africa. The former French colony is the latest on the list. Reports claim that a message was sent from the French embassy to French citizens living in Niger, which is now under military rule. President Bazoum made his first public appearance in a tweeted photo since being driven out of office, in which the ousted leader could be seen smiling next to the Chadian president. Deby is in Niger to mediate between the coup leaders and the government. The coup leaders have also managed to garner support from Burkina Faso and Mali. The two nations, also under military leadership, have issued a warning stating that any international military intervention in Niger will be seen and reacted to as declaration of war.
That part right there, that's the part I wanted you guys to hear. So they've made this announcement that any Western military intervention in Niger will be seen as a declaration of war. They are making a statement here. They are letting Western countries know that they do not want them intervening in their country, in their politics, so to speak, either. They don't want them coming there. The military bases that are there from the U.S. military bases and the French U.S. military bases, like I said before, those bases shouldn't be there in the first place anyway, but they are there. So they're letting them know, show up here if you want to, but you might have to catch these hands, is basically what they're saying.
Les gouvernements de transition du Burkina Faso et du Mali sont profondément indignés et surpris par le déséquilibre observé.
Any military intervention against Niger is tantamount to a declaration of war against Burkina Faso.
Entre, d'une part, la célérité et l'attitude aventurière de certains responsables politiques.
And Mali, warning that any military intervention against Niger would entail a withdrawal of
d'Afrique de l'Ouest, désireux d'utiliser la force armée pour établir un ordre constitutionnel dans un pays souverain. Et
Burkina Faso and Mali from ECOWAS, as well as the adoption of self-defense measures in support.
D'autre part, l'inaction, l'indifférence et la complicité passive de ces organisations et de ces responsables politiques à aider les États et les peuples victimes de terrorisme depuis une décennie et abandonnés à leur sort.
And we'll go ahead and pause that there. So they're not playing around. I mean, can you blame them? Now, I want to show you how the people feel about this, because they're saying here Niger belongs to us. I want to show you this clip here from NBC News, and I want to show you what the citizens of Niger have to say. It's not just the political leaders there. It's the people. Listen to this. Look at all those people. Thousands of military coup supporters marched through the capital waving Russian flags and condemning former colonial power France. You guys see what's happening here? This is what NATO, I think, is really afraid of. All these other countries saying no to those NATO allies and saying yes to some of those countries that are a part of BRICS. Let's continue. It says coup backers were seen attacking the French embassy and burning French flags in protests organized with the new military leaders.
10 ans, pendant 12 ans de régime, le quotidien des Nigériens n'a pas changé.
I'm going to pause and read this. This part's important. For 12 years, the daily lives of the people of Niger have remained unchanged. Okay.
Par conséquent, les Nigériens appelés à sortir massivement.
As a result, Nigerians called for an end to this policy.
De dehors cette politique. Nous sommes également sortis pour dire à ces petits Macron.
We also come out to tell this little Macron from France that Niger belongs to us. I love how they called him little Macron. He's tiny.
De la France, que le Niger nous appartient. C'est à nous de faire ce que nous voulons de Niger, ce que nous voulons, nous traitons.
Okay, he said it's up to us to do what we want with Niger. It's what we want. We deal with who we want and how we want.
Avec qui nous voulons et comme nous voulons.
West African leaders have threatened to use force if military junta fails to reinstate ousted President Mohamed Bazoum within 1 week. And there you go. So I wanted to show you that there. So yeah, there are many changes that are happening in countries in Africa, and not just Africa, but the global South. You know, people are starting to rise up. And I think that because some of these countries have joined BRICS, I think it gives the people a little bit more, I don't know, energy, or a little bit more, I guess, like guts to like just stand up and push back. This is something they've probably been wanting to do for a long time. But it's important that you have people that are backing you and support you in pushing out these Western countries from intervening in your country and taking your resources. It's not something that one man can just stand up to. You got to have the support of the other people in the country. And they have that apparently. And so here we are. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algorithm. Thank you. The little Marco just did it for me, man. Little Macron. Yeah. The little Macron. That did it for me. Top G says all these European neocolonialists take and give nothing, less than nothing. JB says, I appreciate you covering parts of this story I didn't get to. Thank you so much, Sabs. This story is actually exciting to me because this means they're ending imperial rule. That's right. And Leslie says, the government in the US did the same thing. Oh, to Myanmar, installed their puppet government. The junta overthrew the American puppet government and is now funding terrorists to put their puppet government. Yep. 100%. I'll take those comments on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, JVB. Sabs makes listening to the news about Armageddon fun. That's interesting. Bless her for her ebullient personality, but she is tough as nails, mind you. Thank you for that. And thank you for the tip, Roger. Sabrina, another satisfied customer I introduced to Sabrina. I got him to subscribe. He was like, yo, I like the way she presents her stuff and her presentation and delivery. Like I keep telling you, stay the course, stay on mission. Don't let yourself be dragged into the BS and they will come to you. How would you feel about another country overthrowing our government? Watch what you ask. I may join them. They come looking for our politicians and Supreme Court justices. I'm going to be like, yeah, there they go over there. That one's hiding over there. That one's behind that thing over there. Yeah, get them. Oh, I better say because YouTube. The views of Roger Meadows are not necessarily supported by the show. I have to add that. Add that for YouTube because they'll hear that. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our next story. And this is in reference to DSA. You'll notice AOC was also on that thumbnail with DSA because this article came my way from one of you, actually. It appears that Democratic Socialists of America have decided to shift their politics. Now, this will make a lot of sense considering how some of these regressive members in Congress have been voting in reference to legislation, how some of them have chosen to endorse Joe Biden, how they have been strike breakers. They've gone against the workers. And now we have actually the organization that some of them are a part of, DSA, choosing to shift their politics further to the right and away from any type of socialism and apparently anti-war views. Now, this comes from World Socialist website. I know I interviewed Eric London. Oh, we didn't have the best conversation. We agreed on some things, though, but he's spot on here. On eve of 2023 DSA convention, leaders strategized to suppress socialist and anti-war views. Didn't I tell you guys this was coming? The DSA biannual national convention are always occasions for the organization to try to present itself as something it is not, socialist. But at this year's convention, which begins August 4th, the effort is proving to be more difficult than ever because the DSA has systemically violated every single fundamental principle of socialism and thoroughly exposed itself as a pro-capitalist, pro-imperialist faction of the Democratic Party. As a result, this year's attempt to dress up the DSA as socialist is acquiring a fascio character. For example, the DSA convention plans to vote on resolutions demanding no endorsement of Joe Biden, though the most prominent DSA member, AOC, has already appeared on Pod Save America to endorse Biden, affirming the importance of socialist anti-militarism, though almost the entire DSA congressional slate voted to spend tens of billions of dollars waging imperialist war against Russia, and immediately retracted a milquetoast request that the Biden administration consider negotiations, defending tenants' rights, though a DSA member and the Massachusetts state legislature recently voted to raise rents on working people by 10% a year, calling for railroad public ownership, though 8 months ago, the DSA congressional leadership voted to illegalize a potential strike by 100,000 railroad workers against the private rail corporations. And last but not least, opposing Israeli apartheid. Though DSA Representative Jamal Bowman voted to arm the occupation just last year while AOC voted present. No matter how many resolutions the DSA delegates pass, they cannot undo the organization's right-wing actions. These actions are not violations of the DSA principles. They are entirely consistent with the DSA's long-standing role as an anti-working class, pro-imperialist organization. This is now becoming too obvious to deny. As one former AOC supporter wrote in a widely shared New York Magazine article, we might finally have to admit that the too pure to live lefties who insisted that nothing would ever come from all of this noise were right, and that the Democratic Party is simply structured resistance to socialist change. There is no fruit to pick here. This article references AOC's March 2021 interview in which she attacked left-wing criticism of Biden as privilege. I remember that. But the DSA plays a critical role in the operation of the two-party system, and the show must go on. The DSA, here's their steps here. 1, siphon social opposition behind the Democratic Party. 2, block the development of an independent revolutionary movement. And 3, provide pro-capitalist, imperialist Democratic Party with a left fig leaf to better carry out its policies. The DSA's ability to fulfill this critical function in this bourgeoisie politics depends on having some left legitimacy, and its leaders are increasingly concerned that it has none. To discuss the present crisis, the DSA pre-convention edition of Socialist Forum featured a 10,000-word transcript of a recent interview titled Talking Strategy with DSA Leaders, featuring DSA co-chair David Duhad, National Political Committee Chair Christian Hernandez, and longtime DSA members Richard Flax and Daraka Larimore Hall. In both the interview and a related discussion with Flax and Larimore Hall, published in late 2022, the DSA leaders respond defensively to growing support for Marxist, communist, and Trotskyist politics. That means people like Shama Sawant, they probably not really trying to get behind too much, even though she's a member of DSA. They're trying to move away from that. This is very important, and I hope you guys share this with your friends and fam. This is very concerning because basically what is happening here is that the DSA, the organization, is following the lead of the so-called progressive politicians in Congress. Where they move is where the organization is now trying to move, because they have no legitimacy anymore, considering the fact that these progressives that are a part of DSA are not upholding the DSA principles when it comes to voting on legislation. So what tends to happen? The organization is going to shift and move with them. Let's continue. the DSA dominated by fears of left-wing movement against the Democratic Party. In the Talking Strategy interview, NPC Chair Hernandez begins by attacking critics of DSA's right-wing actions for their impatience. Referring to some arguments on the negative end about DSA's work within the Democratic Party, come back to it. Well, it didn't work, so this actually is a dead end. Hernandez did not try to explain why supporting the Democratic Party is not a dead end, and instead responded with the opportunist's favorite excuse: we have to stay rooted in where we are now and the conditions that we have to contend with. In other words, they're not serious about actually challenging power. They're not serious about actually challenging the establishment part of the Democratic Party. They're not serious about that, even though that's what this organization is supposed to be all about. This is where we are now, she says. We have to contend with it. DeHauld, a former DNC official and longtime Democratic Party operative, referenced a discussion with a young DSA member who raised left-wing criticisms of the organization's orientation to Democrats. Later, he said, I have come to the conclusion that objectively, DSA members aren't that interested in doing this Democratic Party work. I've made arguments about where it could be effective, but people don't seem interested. Responding to this growing left-wing sentiment, Larimore Hall emphasized the DSA's leadership's central task of preventing this growing layer of radicalized workers and youth from breaking with the Democratic Party. And let me break down to you what that means. That means that the organization is not going to be supporting anyone that is outside of the Democratic Party, even if they're running on the issues that the organization has as a part of its platform. So that means that DSA is not going to get behind a candidate like Cornel West. We're going to get into that in just a second, even though he's running on progressive policies. It means that DSA is not going to get behind anyone who's really serious about challenging power. They're not going to get behind a third-party movement. They're not going to get behind an independent movement. Their goal is to keep you in the Democratic Party. And if that means that they can't change the Democratic Party, then they will just go along with the Democratic Party. I hope everybody is following here, because this is exactly what I warned people was going to happen. Let's continue. We get stuck in these conversations like, well, maybe someday there'll be an independent party of the left that we'll be a part of. And then that just sort of hangs there. Why be agnostic about that? It seems to me very, very clear that it's not going to be. And the refreshing thing about DSA founder Michael Harrington was that he just said it's not going to happen. We are not going to have a third party of the left. We're not going to have a socialist party in the United States. Then what the hell is the point of Democratic Socialists of America? What's the point? If you're not serious about actually championing those kind of views and challenging the powers that be, that is opposed to the policies that you support, what is the point? The point is money. Some people aren't going to like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it. The entire purpose, in my opinion, of Democratic Socialists of America is to raise money, get more people into the Democratic Party, and make money off of an organization that poses itself as a socialist organization to inspire young people, particularly Gen Z, younger millennial people, to inspire them to believe and to think that they're radical and they're doing something radical by being a part of this organization because of the policies that they have on their platform. But ideally, DSA, much like Justice Democrats, is a grift. It's a scam. DSA's membership jumped dramatically after Bernie Sanders' 2016 run. This organization's been around since what, like the 1980s? All of a sudden, they jumped thousands and thousands of members when Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, and even more when he ran in 2020, and even more when the squad members ran for office. The more members they get, the more money they make. And then there's also the idea of having a brand. The fact that you can point to people like AOC and Bernie Sanders and say, they're a part of DSA. Look at who represents us out there. The problem with that is, the moment that those politicians move away from your politics, move away from your platform, and start to just go along with Democrat establishment because it's easier for their political career, it makes your organization look like a chump. And when the organization refuses to remove those members or publicly call out those members for their wrongdoing, it makes the organization look like a scam. Keep joining our organization that's not producing any real socialist action or energy in this country. Keep giving us dues. Keep paying us money to not really do the things that we say we're going to do. It's a grift. That is why over 10,000 people have left the organization in the past year and a half. This piece here I want to mention as well. Let me go down here. In the related discussion with Larimore Hall and Flax, a signatory to Students for the Democratic Society, 1962 Port Huron Statement, political associate of DSA's founder, Michael Harrington, and an original member of the DSA, the two DSA leaders share fears over the growing radicalization among working class youth. Working class. Isn't that the group they're supposed to fight for? Aren't they supposed to fight for the working class people? Now they're afraid of those working class people. Because you see, I went to one DSA meeting many years ago, and I noticed none of the people in that meeting were working class. They claim to be this organization that's for the working class, and it is the working class. Those people weren't working class. All those people were PMCs, professional managerial class. Granted, I am here in Boston, but from what I've heard from people, it's been like that where they are too. This organization has propped up and I would say promoted in a way people who are of that class, not people who are working class. And that's a problem. Now they're afraid of that class. Larimore Hall says a lot of people that got interested in socialist ideas through Occupy and the Sanders campaign then got really hungry for more information about what is this socialism stuff, looking on the internet, reading books, checking out existing organizations, and sometimes I think that has gone a little bit array. Really. Among the existing organizations, Flax mentions in the program are followers of Leon Trotsky, which today means the Socialist Equality Parties and the World Socialist website. She goes on to say, referring to different methods to bury interest in ultra-left, sectarian, and Trotsky cults. That's the question. How do you bury it? This hostility towards revolutionary socialism explains why the DSA's leadership systematically promoted tweets attacking WSWS. In May of 2021, with imaginary ice picks, the weapon used by the Stalinist GPU to assassinate Leon Trotsky in Mexico City in August 20th of 1940. And this part right here. The need for full-throated anti-communism to bury independent socialist sentiment. The moderator of discussion between Flax and Larimore asked both of them a revealing hypothetical. Say you got called up to the DSA convention. You know, the communists are out there. A lot of folks, a lot of young people have taken on a lot of labels, unburdened by the fact that there is no Soviet Union right now. A lot of well-meaning people who just want to effing finally do something about capitalism. What's the elevator pitch here? What do you say to these people? Listen to this, guys. I'm going to highlight this. Larimor's position is we have to rescue that full-throated leftist anti-communism that just floated away in the 1960s. Young people need to understand how much of a mistake the vanguard Leninist view, which got credibility only because of the Bolsheviks won in the Bolshevik Revolution, not because anything that followed that is a model for anybody. We have every reason to try to make very clear what is wrong with communism. Flax agrees, calling for a principled anti-communism. As I've said before, these people aren't socialists. Democratic social, I don't even know, it shouldn't even be called democratic socialists. What they're really for is social democracy, right? Like similar to what Denmark has, so to speak. But you'll hear people like AOC say she's a socialist. They're not. One more piece here, and then I'm going to show you how this involves Cornel West. Larimore Hall goes, oh no, not that part, sorry. Justifying DSA support for imperialist war and strike breaking. Oh my God, this kills me. For 40 years, the DSA has dedicated itself to a strategy aimed at realigning the Democratic Party, which has only resulted in moving the party even further to the right. DeHalday says, how I view realignment is as an effort to make the Democratic Party into a small s, a small d, social Democratic Party. You guys see this? You see the social Democratic Party? This ain't no damn club. Including through encouraging Democratic Party officials who backed Sanders to take on institutional roles in the Democratic Party. DeHalday presents New York Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul as having helped DSA pass our program on state environmental reforms, endowing her pro-police right-wing administration with false left bona fides. You see this? Look to the people that they're cheering on. Kathy Hochul? Christian Hernandez issued a craven apology for DSA elected officials who voted to crush strikes and fund imperialist war. As much as people want to dismiss our federal electeds, they've given us a lot of clout with international parties. While it's great that they're DSA members, they are also accountable to other groups and recognize that other groups had a hand in their victory. In other words, if a politician belongs to the DSA and also legislates in the interests of the railroad companies and the Pentagon, they are merely being held accountable to their constituents on Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. And it is still great if they are in Congress representing the DSA. You guys see the problem here? Exactly. They're just liberals. They're just liberals that happen to have a candidate run on progressive issues 2 election cycles in the row, along with Justice Democrats. And that's what really brought membership to that party. If you look at the DSA's numbers before Bernie Sanders' presidential run in 2016, you see a big difference. Now, why is this a problem in reference to Cornel West? I want to show you the statement that's made here. This is coming from AOC, where she says, Cornel West bid prompts worries from progressives. AOC's statement is, I just wish he wasn't doing it. You see what's happening? We're just going to go straight to her statement. And I'm going to show you something else that happened. Now, with the Republican nomination of former President Trump seeming more and more plausible, progressives are becoming more outspoken about their worries. I think he has a very long record of service and academic thought leadership. This comes from AOC. I think just right now, given the Electoral College, it's very difficult to square the very real threat of a Republican presidency with the risk of giving up the very small margin of electoral votes needed to ensure that President Biden wins. Cornel West is not running to ensure that President Biden wins. Cornel West is running to ensure that he wins. And even if he does not win, there is still a movement that follows after him. You see, this is where they missed the whole movement piece. They're not really part of any movement. They fed us a lot of BS. AOC, Bernie Sanders, all of them, they fed us a lot of garbage about building a movement, a progressive movement, and a revolution across this country. But at the end of the day, they were just trying to get elected. She's not serious, and it's not just her. They're not serious about actually challenging power. They're not serious about actually trying to get those policies into the White House. Because if they really cared about Medicare for all, they would be supporting candidates that support Medicare for all. But they don't care about Medicare for all. That's why they didn't force the vote. Just like that, they fall back. Until recently, lawmakers on the left didn't feel much need to voice any reservations they had about Cornel West, which he first announced he was running for president in early June. He did so under the Grassroots People's Party, without much fanfare. Democrats weren't really applauding him, but weren't criticizing his bid either. There seemed little cause for concern on Capitol Hill. That shifted after West changed his affiliation to the Green Party just a few weeks later. The move prompted bad recollections of Democrats' 2016 when third-party nominee Jill Stein captured enough votes that election analysts said helped contribute to Trump's edge in certain states. And I told you guys, I've argued against that multiple times. Multiple times. The difference now is that West, unlike Stein, is a revered part of the progressive movement who has garnered goodwill from sitting members of Congress for his activism on behalf of working class people. Now let's connect this back to the DSA article from World Socialist website. Listen to this. Working class people. What did they mention to you in the article about the DSA shift? They were concerned about radicalism of the working class people. It is going to come to a point, it's only inevitable, that at some point, the working class people are going to throw their hands up in the air and say, we can't do this anymore. Now, how do you prevent that from happening? You convince the working class people, especially the ones who gave their last to people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, that we have to move along with the Democratic Party leadership. In other words, you move those people further to the right. That's how you do it. And the problem with having people like AOC support it and be against someone who is actually trying to do like a third party movement, like Dr. West, is that it convinces a lot of young people, especially those who admire people like AOC, that she's actually leading some type of progressivism and that this is the direction that they should go in that's actually going to help their lives in the future. And the truth is, it will not. It will not help them in the future. Economically, things are already a problem now. Just wait 10, 15 years from now. Then you have to deal with the issue of climate. What are all these young people supposed to do? By that time, AOC will almost probably reach Nancy Pelosi status. She will have elevated her political career. DSA will get probably more money the more famous she becomes and the more she moves up that political ladder. And the working class will be abandoned yet again. I say this because of what I'm about to get into in just a second in reference to RFK Jr. We cannot lose sight of the big picture here. We have to remember why we all got to be a part of this movement to begin with in the first place. And there's been a lot of shady things that's happened with DSA. Mike Connolly, he's a local politician here, Recently, Boston DSA members elected new leadership, and one of their first orders of business is to schedule a vote to expel me from the organization. A resolution with 7 charges has been drawn up and presented to DSA's membership. Charges include support for Governor Maura Haley, support for Senator Lydia Edwards, and support for Mayor Wu's rent stabilization proposal. Now, why would DSA have a problem with rent stabilization? Isn't that supposed to be something that they're fighting towards? You see what I mean about the organization moving further to the right? Mike's local. This is even local DSA doing these things. We have to pay attention to what's happening. And I told you guys, we would not be able to change the Democratic Party. If anything, they're going to change us or the politicians that are supposed to be progressive that are a part of it. They're going to change them so that they can keep their political careers, but not the other way around. And that's why we have to leave it. And by the way, they know that this would happen. They knew that eventually people would get fed up because they're not producing results. And when you're not producing results, people start to walk away. And people started to walk away and say, we need to leave the duopoly. We need a third party movement. I'm tired of this. So now they have to come back in because they're still in the party. They have to come back and they got to pull you back in and convince you why you need to just go along with the establishment that they told you to fight against. All these people who came to you and told you that money in politics was a problem. Corporate money is a problem. All of a sudden, they're going to convince you to vote for the corporate candidate, and your lives will not fundamentally improve, but theirs will. Think about that. Thank you for the super chat, Raphael. How did you master French, lady? So well, lady. LOL. I didn't. I don't know. I really didn't. Thank you, Janice. Love the wee, Sabby. Even when delivering terrible news, you manage to put a smile on your face. Thanks for being who you are and presenting how you do. I try. Thank you, Cup of Joy. DSA saying the quiet part out loud. If this doesn't convince more leftists and working class Americans to vote third party, I don't know what will. Hashtag Cornel West 2024. I hear you. Thank you, Janice. DSA has always been a fraudulent organization intended to prevent a legit socialist org from gaining support. Bingo! It is a bait and switch BS org, full stop. Ding, 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 ding. Thank you, Not Enough Cereal. Keep the pressure on DSA. We need to boost this narrative repeatedly this election cycle and include facts about dropping membership of DSA after the initial post-Bernie surge. I will do that, Not Enough Cereal. I'll do that. And Robin says their movement is to line their pockets. Bingo. Not yours. We are moving on to the story about Jimmy Dore versus RFK Jr. If you did not see the interview last night, I'm sorry. It's a long interview. Like, it was almost 3 hours long. I watched the entire interview and I have some things to say. Now, I want to start off by saying we're going to get into the first topic. The first topic is healthcare. So we'll get into that one in just a second. I want to start off by saying this. If you are not new to this channel, you guys know how I feel about RFK Jr. You guys know I do not support any candidate running in the duopoly. I don't care if they're a Kennedy or whatever. I don't support that. 2, you guys know how I feel about his position in reference to Israel and Palestine. I don't support that. And 3, I do not support his rhetoric around universal health care. And we're going to start with that one. Because with all the talks about Israel and Palestine, we'll get to that as well. I think this one may have been missed by some people, but I remember it. And then finally, I have to say this. We're going to start by saying this because some of you are not going to be happy with what I have to say. I agree with Jimmy Dore on most issues. I think you all know that. But when I was watching this interview last night, it was really difficult to watch. And this is not to say that Jimmy did not push back, but I felt like there are some things that I feel probably should have been said that were not said. Let's start with the healthcare issue. RFK Jr. is about to talk about the cost of healthcare. Now, this is the one that really, I think, threw me for a doozy. Listen to this.
That same month, the government, the Fed, printed $300 billion unanticipated to pay off the investors in the Silicon Valley Bank. So there's a lot of money for military contractors, and there's plenty of money, for the banksters. But if you're poor in this country, we can't feed you. You cannot feed yourself.
Now, I agree with what he just said there. He's correct. But then he says something that's wiggity whack.
And, so the first thing we need to do is we need to cut the military. We got 800 bases abroad. We need to cut those expenditures back from the raw military expenditure, $900 billion. We need to cut that to $500 billion. And we need to do that right away. And then we need to cut our healthcare costs. Now, all of the Democrats and Republicans are arguing about Obamacare, different ways to pay healthcare, different way, who pays. None of it reduces the cost.
That part right there. Let me put the captions on for this one. I'm sorry, guys. I see some people like, can you put on the captions? Hold on. Let's go back just a little bit. This part right here, the healthcare part.
And we need to do that right away. And then we need to cut our healthcare costs. Now, all of the Democrats and Republicans are arguing about Obamacare, different ways to pay healthcare, different way, who pays. None of it reduces the cost.
That's actually not true. This is the part here where I feel like, number one, Medicare for all. The study in reference to Medicare for all, let's start with just Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all bill. There have been numerous studies that have been performed in reference to that particular bill that showed that Medicare for all is actually cheaper. This has been discussed so many times. In fact, one of the professors that actually went through Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all bill, I don't even know if this guy supported Bernie Sanders or not, but he went through the bill. Even he was able to explain, like, yeah, he's right. It actually does reduce the cost. It actually does save money. But here is RFK Jr. saying that none of it reduces the cost. And this is where I feel like I really wish Jimmy would have pushed back here. Because we all know, all of us that came from that Bernie Sanders movement, I don't think there was a week that went by if we were following the press where we did not hear this talk about Medicare for all. We heard about it constantly. Jimmy knows this though. Jimmy knows that Medicare, it was already proven that Medicare for all actually is cheaper. So I guess I just didn't understand why there was no pushback. There were over 25,000 people watching this interview last night. And I think what bothered me is I hope all these people didn't walk away with the wrong information, particularly those who were not a part of that Bernie movement, who don't know about the whole cost and everything in reference to Medicare for all. They just heard RFK Jr. say none of these actually reduce the cost. And that's not correct. Let me let him finish his statement. Sorry.
It's just who's paying for it, and how do you pay for it? Is it, individual Americans who get stuck with the bill? Is it the hospital systems? Is it the insurance industry? Who is it? And it's like moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. The ship is still going down, and you're just figuring out, who's going to get saved and who's not. But the real question is, why are we spending so much? We spend $4.3 trillion. We spend 20 times as much in real dollars on healthcare than we did when my uncle was president.
Now, I agree. We do spend a lot of money in reference to healthcare. I have to pause it here because then he gets into the pandemic, and I can't play that on here. He's right. We do spend a lot of money in reference to healthcare. He's 100% correct about that. But the problem is that it's really difficult to me watching someone who's an environmental lawyer say that this is what he said on Breaking Points. He said that, yeah, he thinks that everybody should have health care, but he said it's not feasible, that Medicare for all is not feasible. And he said that he would support a public option. But then you're still supporting the pharmaceutical industry. So if RFK Jr. is against the pharmaceutical industry, why would you still want to support it? And that's the part for me. It's like the healthcare one, like, no, like, weren't we mad at AOC and the rest of the squad because they didn't force the vote for Medicare for all? I don't understand what's happening here. So that's the part to me that was just a little, it didn't make sense. So I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why there was no pushback there. And so for people, like I said before, for people who are saying, oh, we can't have Medicare for all in this country, bullshit. How many other countries you see this happen? Bernie Sanders figured this fucking out. And what was really interesting to me is that some of the people, we were talking about this on Twitter last night too, some of the people who were so for all of that back then on Twitter were just like, well, yeah, RFK's right. It's not feasible. We can't do this. We can't da-da-da. I'm like, really? A new politician just comes along and just like that, everybody just changes their mind? You watch them send 800 billion, what, how much billion now? 800 billion for the defense budget. They've sent billions of dollars to Ukraine, but they can't give you health care? We're going to move on to the next topic. And this is the one I think that gave people a headache. We move on to the topic of Israel and Palestine. And you guys know how I feel about this issue. And I know that some of you watching support RFK Jr. I don't. If you haven't figured that out yet, I don't know what to tell you. But this particular issue here, in reference to Israel and Palestine, this was very difficult to watch. Let's go ahead and get into this. We'll interject here and there.
So let's see. What is the? Oh, okay. So now let's get to the uncomfortable part of our interview. So here you say Biden administration extends U.S. habit of interfering in other countries' domestic politics. Now it's threatening Israel with the ending of the special relationship between our two nations. As president, my support of Israel will be unconditional. Now, what do you mean when you say unconditional? Because I immediately thought, if Israel is going to drop a nuclear bomb, I mean, you don't even support America unconditionally. You're against the Iraq war. You're against Libya. You're against right now the Ukraine war. So you didn't support. So what did you mean by that?
So this is where I think you'll notice RFK Jr. In my opinion, I felt like he got a little bit uncomfortable, like when this conversation came up. So Jimmy's asking him, like, what do you mean when you say you support Israel unequivocally? And yeah, I think that's a good question. Like, what do you mean by that? Listen to this.
And the special relationship that we have now, which Biden was threatening to end, if the Israelis did not change a domestic policy about having to do with their judicial reform. Now, I want to say this. I am against the judicial reform. Israel has the has probably, not probably, but Israel has the best judiciary in the world. It's better than ours. It is more humane. It is the only country in the world that outright forbids torture, even in the ticking time bomb.
When he said that it's more humane in reference to Israel's judiciary, by the way, we're not talking about the people. We're talking about the government, right? The Israeli government. More humane for who? More humane for the Palestinians? Well, who is it actually more humane for? Is it more humane for the Ethiopian Jews? Let's let him continue.
Scenario. It's the only judiciary that's actually specifically addressed the ticking time bomb scenario. So you have a terrorist who you've caught, who knows there's a bomb that's going to kill tens of thousands of civilians. And the Israel judiciary has said, even in that case, you cannot torture him. No other judiciary in the world says that. The Israel judiciary has, there's, I think 3 of the 12 Supreme Court justices are Palestinians. There are Palestinian judges all over, as there are legislatures, and it's guaranteed, full participation of Palestinians in the electoral process. There's 1.9 million Palestinians in Israel who vote. They elect legislatures.
But I just want to pause here, because when he talks about the Palestinians that are elected legislators, when we spoke to the Palestinian Network, and I talked about this just a couple of days ago, they explained that not all of the people that are Palestinians that are in those positions are actually doing for the Palestinian people, that some of them have sold out so that they can benefit and not be a part of the scrutiny. We see stuff like that happen in this country. We see things like that happen with people like, let's talk about some of the Black politicians in DC that did that. People like Hakeem Jeffries, people like Barack Obama that sold out so that they could benefit from the system, even though that means that you won't, and they're not actually going to be helping you. So as Cornel West says, Black faces in high places sometimes, or all skin folk and kinfolk.
Represented in the judiciary, and they can practice freedom of religion. It's the only place in the Mideast where you can do that. They guarantee protection for gays. There was a Pride parade 2 weeks ago in Israel with 150,000 people in Israel, in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. At the same time in Iran, they were hanging gays from cherry pickers. It's the only.
Does it protect gay people that are Palestinian? Like that, it just, let me go on.
Place where women have full rights. It's the only place where Palestinians can legally complain about their government with no fear of reprisal. So anywhere else, including the West Bank, if you complain about the extremely corrupt governments in the West Bank or Gaza, you risk your life, and you'll face torture and death. So,
just because the judiciary has those laws doesn't mean it's being followed. We have laws here in the United States. Are they always followed? No, they're not. Let me continue.
The judiciary in Israel is unique in the world. It's also said you can't pressure people putting pressure on their family. You can't pressure terrorists in that way at all.
I have a feeling that happens all the time, though. I mean, again,
but you can go to jail for it.
But I'm not. You're right. But I'm not I'm not an expert.
And you can sue people for it.
Okay. So I get your defense of Israel.
So yeah, but I'm not, and
some people, like, when just letting you guys know, for those of you who didn't see this and you weren't in the live chat last night, by the way, live chat was wild. Like, I had to get out of the chat. Because in the live chat, there were some people saying like, yay, go Jimmy, go. And there were some people saying like, kick him out. There was like, some people had like, there were a lot of like Palestinian flags. Like, people were saying free Palestine. Like, that started from the very beginning of the interview, by the way. Like I told you, the interview was almost 3 hours. So there was the chat was wild. Like, to leave the chat. But some people, when Jimmy said that comment there, I get your defense of Israel, that didn't sit well with some people. Just letting you know. Let me finish.
I'm not saying that I'm not going to oppose, and I'm co-signing, every
So
policy.
you don't mean unconditional?
No, I don't mean, and that's how I mean unconditional, because we give $3.5 billion to Israel every year. Now we give $2.3 billion to Egypt, which has no human rights, and we give $1 billion to Jordan, which has no human rights, and we give $800 million a year to the Palestinian Authority, which uses that money to pay bounties to Palestinians who kill Jews, not government officials, but Jewish civilians. So if you go to Israel and if you kill a Jew anywhere in the world and you're a Palestinian, the Palestinian Authority will pay you money for that, and they will.
I don't know enough to push back on this.
So I know. I think there's this narrative, and particularly on the liberal left, that says that that portrays Israel as a kind of occupying nation sitting on a Palestinian land, and the whole thing is a lie from start to bottom. And let me just tell you a little.
Did you see what he just did there? So RFK Jr. goes, this lie from the liberal left. Liberals aren't left, first of all. But two, the occupation. Yes, there is occupation. Yes, there are settlements. And it's just, for me, I don't understand. I don't know where he's getting this information from. I don't know if he did get this from Rabbi Shmuley, but it's very telling that he's not having this conversation with people who have been there. Why isn't he having this conversation with Max? We're going to get into the Max Blumenthal thing in a second. Why isn't he having this conversation with Max Blumenthal or Katie Halper or Aaron Mate? Kim Iverson went to Gaza. Like, why isn't he having this conversation with the people who have actually been there and they've seen it and they've reported on it? Let's go.
A little bit about the history. Israel and Jordan were part of what was called the British Mandate when the Ottoman Empire, in 1922, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed after World War I. We went to war. The Palestinians were on the side of the Ottoman Empire against the Allies. The Jews were on our side. There were more Jews in Palestine at that time than there were Palestinians. But at the end, the Ottoman Empire disappears. And so there's a lot of land that is part of the Ottoman Empire. And the question is, what do you do with that land? Woodrow Wilson and the League of Nations said, what we're going to do is we're going to give it to whoever lives there. Whoever lives on that land now is the sovereign of their own country. Well, they took Palestine, and they said, there's half the people, a little over half are Jews, a little under half are Arabs. So we're going to cut it in two, and we're going to give half, part of the Jews, part of the Arabs. But there was so much anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic bigotry at that time that they gave 4/5 of it to the Arabs and 1/5 to the Jews, just a tiny sliver 9 miles across to the Jews, tiny.
Can we just stop here for a second? Who is in power right now? Who is in the minority? The Palestinian people are in the minority. The Ethiopian Jews are in the minority. Who is in power now? One of the things is like RFK Jr., he likes to go back to history and say, let's talk about what happened, but let's talk about what's happening right now. Let's talk about people being pulled out their homes, kids being beaten in the street, killed in the street. RFK Jr. wants to pretend like these things aren't happening. You're going to see that in just a second, because there's a video that Jimmy's going to show, and you'll watch just to see how he reacts when he shows that video.
Tiny little piece of land with their sacred sites that were not Muslim sacred sites ever. So, that was the original distribution. And then in the 48 war, when Israel got its statehood, they were immediately attacked by by Egypt, Jordan, Syria, all the surrounding countries, and Lebanon, and miraculously beat them off. The Palestinians were on the side of the attackers.
Man,
in all of those countries.
You know what? This for me is just, who told him this? Where is this history coming from? I have yet to see him sit down and have this conversation with Palestinian people.
Countries, all the Jews were expelled. So all of those countries expelled every Jew in the country and took away something like 27 million square miles of land that were just taken away from them. And those Jews were all sent to Israel. Israel did not do that to the Palestinians in Israel. It allowed them to stay. And then, it's been attacked. It was then attacked in 1967, and in that land it was attacked, and it took land from its attackers. The Palestinians again were on the losing side. But it took strips of land from the attackers, which is the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and the Golan Heights. And then Israel said, look, we want to give it all back. But we're not going to give it back because you can attack us from those parts. We're not going to give it back unless you promise us peace. If you renounce violence against us, if you admit that we have a right to exist, we'll give it back. Egypt said yes.
Okay. Correct me in the chat if I am incorrect, but from what I read, and let me know, I'm not without fault. From what I read, it was the Palestinians' land first. This is why, and I'll show you this in a little bit. This is why RFK Jr. is not having this conversation with certain people. I'm gonna show you in a little bit, because that shit was revealed today that just confirmed what I've been telling you all along, what his campaign is doing. How they are purposely, and I know the person, how they are purposely making it so that he will not have this conversation anymore. What's that about? Let's continue.
And Syria got the Golan Heights and Sinai, and they got it back. Jordan wouldn't do it. Oh, and today you have, the Palestinian Authority, and in Gaza, if you kill a Jew, you get a street named after you. The children are taught from kindergarten that killing Jews is an act of patriotism. And 85% of those countries, people in those countries, when polled, believe that it's okay to kill civilian Jews, and that it's okay, and that Israel has no right to exist, and their purpose is to destroy Israel and to exterminate the Jewish people. Now,
if you pay close attention here, and he's going to continue on, he's now smearing the Palestinian people. He's going to say, when it comes to, Israel, you can't paint everyone with a broad brush. That's why I continue to say we're talking about the government. We're not talking about the people as a whole. There are Jewish people in Israel that are not on board with this, by the way, that do not support what is happening to the Palestinian people. But in this interview, he is painting Palestinians with this generalization. It just, the kids are taught to kill, but what?
Israel, on the other hand, only deliberately attacks military targets. So civilians do get killed, but for example, in Jenin, in the recent battle over Jenin.
We'll pause here and we'll get into Jenin. That's not true. This part right here, only attacks military targets. Okay. The Palestinian journalist, who's a U.S. citizen, who was killed, she had on a helmet and she had on armor. We talked about this a couple nights ago. Helmet and had on armor. Was she a military target? When this was brought up during his event in New York City, he was supposed to answer the question that Janet asked him. Rabbi Shmuley stood up to interrupt and say, no, you don't know where you're getting the information from. Then tried to smear the woman and say that she was anti-Semitic, even though she explained at the beginning of the question that she was Jewish. And stood up and said, no, it was just a casualty. It was not a target. She had on a helmet and armor. You had to hit her right between here. That's been debunked multiple times. So what is with this rhetoric? It's only military target. That is a lie. That is an outright lie.
Jenin is a bomb factory. It's terrorist bomb factory. But Israel, unlike Russia, which when they have areas like that in Chechnya, or the United States in Iraq, we bomb the whole neighborhood because we're not going to send troops in there who are going to die protecting people.
You're saying Israel does? I know I've covered stories where they bombed schools.
Yeah,
well, but not
what are you talking about?
never deliberately.
Oh yes.
Oh, in war.
That is a damn lie. That is a damn lie. And Jimmy's saying it in a way like Jimmy's trying to be polite, and he's like, "Oh yes, that's true." I don't understand where RFK Jr. is getting this information from. It's disgusting.
Or listen,
yes, that's not true.
Yeah, it is. Israel,
of course,
the
it's true.
Listen, the IDF. Colonel Camp was one of the top military experts in the world.
I've covered these stories.
Well, I understand.
Jimmy covered the story, but RFK here to let you know, sorry, Jimmy, even though you covered those stories, what I'm saying is true. So he letting Jimmy know, I don't believe, I know you covered the story, but what you said isn't true. Boy.
And maybe somebody, I'm saying it's a policy. Of course, in war, stuff happens. And you may have individuals who kill a reporter, who do something like that. But the policy of the Israeli military is always only to attack military targets. Now, of course, that doesn't always happen. But let me tell you this. The politics, the military policy of every one of the surrounding nations and of Gaza and of the West Bank is not to attack military targets, it's to attack.
He's talking about a policy. Just because they have a policy doesn't mean it's being followed. Doesn't mean, is RFK seriously just going to sit up here and ignore the hundreds of videos that I know I've seen, that a lot of us have seen, where they have attacked not military targets? I've watched them beat kids in the street. Was that child a military target? I don't know, man.
Individual civilian Jews, that is the target.
Okay.
Oh, and it's the opposite of what Israel
So
does.
let me. So
and by the way,
well,
the
here
$3.5 billion that we give to Israel was part of the Tava and Camp David peace agreement. So we said, okay, we're going to contribute to this peace agreement. I'm making these payments, to Israel. That was our part in it. And that was our promise. And, we get a lot for that money. So anyway, I could talk about it.
All about the money. I hope everybody caught that part when he says we get a lot for that money. So it's all about the money. We made that promise as a part of Camp David, and and we get a lot for that money. So because we get a lot for that money, we should just sit back and ignore the atrocities that are happening to the minority groups in Israel? Because we getting that money? Is that what this really about? Now, Jimmy's going to show him a video. Watch this.
I know. So let me I have to push back on you a little bit on that.
I'm happy to. I'm happy for the opportunity to explain my position.
So here you're talking about how they inside the hospital premises, Israeli military rained down tear gas and bombs. That's there. They also use.
Yeah, but this is Jenin. Now in Jenin,
he interrupts Jimmy He didn't let Jimmy finish what he was saying. Notice how quick he was. By the way, he didn't interrupt him the whole interview before we got to this part. He does a lot of interrupting here during the conversation about Israel and Palestine. This is a hospital that was bombed, tear gas bomb. It was a hospital. Okay, so think about all the people who were just there sick, minding their own business. Listen to RFK Jr. make excuses for this. This is what set me off last night on Twitter. I tweeted about this on Twitter, and I said the fact that RFK Jr. is sitting here making excuses for why they attacked a hospital. Continue.
Okay, and Janine, you're looking at Janine here. Not a single civilian died, and the IDF risked lives to go in there and do door-to-door.
But they did use, but they also did bomb it. They also,
but the terror. Listen,
right? With
why is he interrupt? So I want to bring back something that many of you have already acknowledged last night. RFK Jr. is doing to Jimmy Dore similar to what Anderson Cooper did to Cornel West. And I covered that interview as well. RFK Jr., for the most part, Jimmy did not interrupt him. The first 30 minutes of the freaking video or freaking interview, RFK Jr. was talking about his personal life. Okay? Which I didn't really give two fucks about. He just went on talking about like his personal life. And I'm like, can we get to some policy? Can we get to his presidential candidacy? He talked mainly, just kept rambling on and on and on and on. But when we got to this topic, this is where he chooses to interrupt. And one of the things that people have pushed back on is people have said, and we talked about this last night as well, I felt like there was some similarities here when I looked at that interview with Anderson Cooper and Cornel West. And I criticized Anderson Cooper a lot in that interview because I said he wasn't even allowing Cornel West to finish what he was saying once they got into the foreign policy. Similar to what RFK Jr. was doing right here to Jimmy Dore. Once we got into this particular issue, he keeps interrupting him. And I'm like, no, why don't you let him finish what he's saying? What are you trying to prove? What are you trying to hide? Why don't you let him finish speaking like he let you finish speaking? Jimmy didn't interrupt the whole time. So what was this about? Let's let it continue.
With jets, with military jets, they did.
No, but nobody died. The terrorists are put deliberately with the bomb facilities in hospitals or near them or near schools in order to, that is a deliberate military strategy by them.
I'm the least informed guy to push back on you on this, right? But I have to try a little. So let me do one more.
But RFK Jr., see, let me say something here about what Jimmy just said. Jimmy said he's the least informed to push back in reference to this. But see, RFK Jr. knows that Jimmy doesn't know as much about this as Max Blumenthal does or as Aaron Monte does. You see what I mean? He knows that. And so that's why, like, if I were Jimmy, something that I've kind of learned, throughout the years, never admit to them that you never say that out loud. Like, I wouldn't have said that out loud because now RFK Jr. is like, oh, okay. So I wouldn't have said that. Now he's going into this issue. The Israeli occupation pours cement into water springs into the Al-Hira area south of Hebron to block them and prevent Palestinians from using them in agriculture. Listen, and Jimmy covered this story too.
Here is the Israeli occupation pours cement into the water springs at the Al-Hira area south of Hebron to block and prevent Palestinians from using their water in agriculture. So we don't have to play it. It's all right.
Yeah.
So that's happening.
And I don't know enough about that, Jimmy, to be.
And here we go with the typical politician answer. And this is something, it's not just RFK that does this. A lot of politicians do this, or candidates that are running do this. When it's something that they feel they can't push back on or they can't refute, all of a sudden is, I don't know enough about that particular incident. We saw him do the same thing in New York City at the event when Janet brought up the issue with the Palestinian journalists when he finally did answer after Rabbi Shmuley sat down, he said, I don't know enough about it. Guys, that's typical politicians speak. When they can't refute it, I don't know enough about it. Or my other favorite one is, I have to look into that. He know all this whole entire history of Israel, which he claimed to tell everybody about on the show. But when it comes to particular issues that these are current events, all of a sudden I don't know about that.
Yeah, but to be able to address it.
So let's do one more. Here's from Max Blumenthal. He says, Israel's apartheid army leveled Sharuk Tower today in Gaza City. I remember doing some interviews there a few years ago after climbing close to a dozen flights during a blackout. It's home to many media offices, which is precisely why it was targeted. And that was a major residential tower in Israel bombed in Gaza. And there was a bunch of middle class families that lived there.
Yep.
So let's watch this. So there it is.
You know what?
This part right here. Now, Jimmy is going to play the video for RFK Jr. to watch. He interrupts right when he starts to play the video. In other words, he don't really want to see it. I've been doing interviews for a long time. I started interviewing people when I was in high school, and I'm here to tell you, I know some of these tricks of the trade. He don't really want to see it. Now, let me let it continue.
So that's not going door to door.
Nope.
And then here is Israel forces forcibly expelled a Palestinian family and demolished their home. So if you say that they're all, it sounds like you're saying all the Palestinians are terrorists.
There he is interrupting again. See what I was saying about the similarities to what Anderson Cooper did to Cornel West and what RFK Jr. is doing to Jimmy Dore? Why won't he let him finish a sentence in reference to this particular topic?
Listen,
and there's collective
the Israel Supreme Court has said that Israel has a policy that if a facility is used by terrorists, a home, that they can plow into the home. That's a policy. That is a military policy, but they don't kill the people in the home deliberately.
What are you talking about? Are you crazy? If you blow up a residential building, obviously the people in the building are going to die, whether they're terrorists or not. So this whole, oh, they don't do this deliberately, bullshit. If you blow up a building, what you trying to do? This is a no-brainer here, guys. Here he comes on the defense. What I have noticed through this interview, through this entire conversation, every time it was something that the Israeli government did that Jimmy was trying to point out, RFK Jr. ran to defend, or the response was, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know about that. But when it came to the Palestinians, there was no defense. There never has been. Every time he talks about this particular issue, there's no defense of the Palestinian people. What is that all about? This is a mess.
And I think that's if you have limited objectives and they're proportional, that sounds proportional to me. Now, in terms of that tower in Gaza, I would love to research that, which I will do.
Okay.
There we go again. I don't know about that one. Let me look into it. You guys see how this works?
And find out what the justification. And I love Max Blumenthal, but I do not think he's objective on Israel. I think his reporting on Israel is not I
love Max Blumenthal, but I do not think he's objective on Israel. And RFK Jr. is objective on Israel. Max Blumenthal reported from there. Max Blumenthal has been there. Now, we are going into the part of the interview where Jimmy Dore is going to ask him if he will interview Max Blumenthal. This is especially important considering the events that transpired earlier this morning. So check this out.
It needs to be questioned.
Okay. Well, here's what I would ask. Just like, Peter Hotez ducked you and Joe Rogan, I would love, because Max is the guy to talk to about this, not me. So would you do an interview with Max, because he would be able to talk to you about this way better than I can. I'm really not good at this.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Max.
Yeah, I mean, Max is a great guy. He's he's a straight shooter.
Pause here for a second. So there's RFK Jr. telling you he would love to talk to Max, and that could be true. He does know who Max Blumenthal is, but it turns out that what I was telling you guys, my suspicions were 100% correct. He would love to talk to Max Blumenthal. Max Blumenthal reached out, I don't know how long ago, to interview RFK Jr., and he's not alone. It's not just me and him that have done this. There are others as well that are being basically blocked out by his communications director. And you'll hear about this in just a second. Preventing RFK from interviewing with people like that. But I'm supposed to believe that he's going to change the CIA. I'm supposed to believe that. Hold on to this. He agreed to interview with Max Blumenthal. Hold that thought. We'll come back to that in a second.
And so here, these can't all be terrorists, right? And they're
well, no.
Turn it all the way down.
Yeah, well, like I said, Israel has a policy that if a home is used for terrorist activity, that they plow it under.
Dude, you can't tell me that every one of those homes have been used for terrorist activity. Just because they have a policy doesn't mean they're actually following it.
It's not a great policy, because what happens immediately is that, the government of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza immediately pay to rebuild the home. I don't think it's effective, but I think it's proportional. Yeah. I think it's likely to discourage terrorism. Terrorism means the murders of Jews. It doesn't mean attacking a military target. And that is the objective. Let's kill as many individual Jews as possible. And that's, that's just wrong. And
what is the objective of the Israeli government? What is the objective of the IDF? For people who have told me, by the way, one of RFK Jr.'s friends who was in a DM group with me. Now, I don't reveal private DMs because I'm not that person. But she is no longer in that DM group. She's mad because I blocked her on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, you probably saw that exchange today. Made it very clear that she don't care about this issue. And I want to say to you, those of you who say you don't care about this issue, I think that you need to pay attention to what the Israeli government, particularly the IDF, is doing, the defense forces are doing, because where do you think our police get their training from? When you talk about Cop City, where do you think that came from? This idea of building Cop City, where do you think it came from? It came from the IDF. That's who trains and militarized the police here in the United States. So when you tell me that you don't care about this particular issue, that lets me know that you have not made the connection to the domestic issues here at home with that issue abroad. And that is a problem. And if you don't care about a cop city, or if you don't care about militarization of the police, then that tells me you don't really care about people in my community either, boo. Because we're the ones that the police usually come after. But don't worry, wait. Because one day it's going to come a point, especially when this country sinks to more economic lows, it's going to come a point where they're going to come after for you too. It's going to come a point where they're not going to be on your side either, boo, unless you are wealthy. It's going to come to a point where the color of your skin isn't going to matter if the police stop you or not. They're going to see you as a threat simply because, going back to that DSA article we talked about, they see the working class as a problem. Wait for it. Let's go ahead and finish up here.
we are subsidizing, they have this whole program called the play to slay or pay to slay. If you kill a Jew, you're taken care of for life. If you go to prison, you're paid a salary while you're in prison, and your family is taken care of. And it's, I don't think we should be paying for that.
So I know. So you don't agree that?
But we should be paying for them to kill Palestinian people, though. It's okay to pay for that. If they're just there, they were just in the way. They were just wrong place, wrong time.
Israel is an apartheid state, even
Not at all.
But doesn't pretty much every human rights organization say it is?
Yeah, but
yes.
Yes.
Okay, and so
yes.
And so,
why aren't they saying that? Why do those same organizations not criticize the killing of gays in Iran and all of these other Arab countries?
Now he trying to do tit for tat. humanrightswatch.org, if you look on their website, yes, they do consider what's happening to the Palestinian people in Israel to be a human rights issue. This is not a secret. RFK Jr. knows that. He just lets you know that he know that. Now he's trying to say, well, why don't they do this in reference to gay people that are being killed in Iran? But you acknowledge that they have established that this is a human rights issue in Israel. Why are you still trying to defend it? You see this? Let's do tit for tat. Why haven't they done this? Why haven't they done that?
They don't.
They know. Israel last year had more condemnation by the UN official resolutions than all nations combined, more than Myanmar, more than China, more than any other nation. Everybody is signaling out Jews, and I would say that's anti-Semitism. What I say,
no, it is not. You see, when he did the interview with Brianna Joy Gray on Rising, he said that, well, no, I'm not saying that people can't criticize the state of Israel. And Bree specifically asked him that there are people that are saying that that's considered to be anti-Semitic. Do you feel that way? He went on to say, well, no, you can criticize the state of Israel. I don't think that's anti-Semitic. So Jimmy is telling him about the Human Rights Watch org and how they have already declared that this is a human rights issue. And now his response is that's anti-Semitic. What?
I do not believe that criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. I don't co-sign.
But you do. I want to be very clear. Every criticism that people have implemented in reference to the state of Israel, again, not the people, the state of Israel, he has knocked it down. Every one. But go ahead and criticize the Palestinians, and he will not defend that, boo. He won't push back on it at all.
For Netanyahu or Likud. But if you are leveling criticism without leveling the same criticism about people who are doing much worse things, then the question is, why not? That has to be anti-Semitism.
You doing that right now? This is the craziest thing that I've just heard.
There's no problem criticizing Israel, but applying a different standard to Israel than used to apply to any other country in the world is anti-Semitism.
Would you agree that Gaza is an open-air prison?
Well, I would say that Gaza, Gaza is self-rule. Right? Gaza is self-rule. It's not occupied. It's self-rule.
Well, they don't have freedom of movement.
Well,
that makes it a prison.
Why doesn't Jordan open up Jordan to the Palestinians?
Let me interject here for just a second. First of all, So Jimmy's explaining to him about Gaza, people don't have freedom of movement. He goes on to say, well, why don't they just open up Jordan for the Palestinians? What did they tell you at the Palestinian Network? What did they say? They explain this very carefully. This is not just about the Palestinians. The goal is to expand beyond that. So opening up Jordan for the Palestinians, that's not a solution. They eventually want to expand there too. This was all discussed multiple times. And he just doesn't, I don't even want to hear that he doesn't get it. I think he gets it. So who's he really here standing for? And another thing, how you call yourself a pro-peace candidate and you okay with the U.S. sending arms to Israel? That's not peace. Call that shit out. I'm going to keep it clear right now. I was at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I covered that rally on my channel. Okay? So I was there in DC. And over time, I have started to see that some of the people who were speakers at that rally aren't actually what you would call anti-war. They were against the war in Russia and Ukraine, but they seem to be okay in reference to this conflict that's happening between Israel and Palestine. That's not anti-war. Some of you have been so busy standing for this motherfucker. Excuse my language, but so busy standing for him. He's a candidate. Oh, he's great on this issue and great on that issue, that you were able to actually just look past the issue in reference to Israel and Palestine, how he is okay with them sending weapons there. Say what you want about me. But when I said no, I meant no. When I was at that rally and all those people, Dennis Kucinich spoke at that rally. He was one of the speakers. And he's the campaign manager with someone who has this rhetoric that seems to be totally okay with what Israel is doing. Okay with it. And Dennis Kucinich stood on the world stage and stood up for the Palestinian people and their rights. What the fuck has happened here? You guys don't see what this is about? You don't see what's really happening here? Some of these people are fake. Some of these people didn't mean that shit when they were at that rally. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Some people were just there, just trying to get their pictures taken and didn't really care that much about the message to begin with. And I'm going to keep it real. And I won't fall for that shit again. I tell you that much. Let me let him go on.
I'm not smart enough to answer that.
Okay,
I don't
so,
know.
you know.
But I do know that you can't bomb a
What
prison.
Israel has said is we will give, you know, we don't want to be anywhere near Gaza. Make an agreement that our country has a right to exist. Make an agreement that you will stop killing Jews, that you will stop telling your children to kill Jews.
What about making an agreement for them to stop killing Palestinian people? The Palestinians are the minority, guys. They're not the majority. The way that he's talking about this, he's talking about it as though the Palestinians are the ones in power and that they are the majority. They're not. It's interesting. He can have all this compassion when it comes to, I have so much compassion. You know, I feel for the Ukrainian people. I have so much compassion for them. I have so much compassion. I feel for, you know, the Jewish people in Israel. I have so much compassion. But when it comes to the Palestinian people, that compassion is gone. Where's that compassion for the Ethiopian Jews, particularly the women who were sterilized beyond their will? We'll show you that in just a second.
You stop naming streets and stadiums after Jew killers. Do that, make us feel safe, and we'll give you, you know, the two-state solution. That's what they've been saying for 60 years. Prince Bandar.
The two-state solution is not viable at this point in time. We've discussed this multiple times. There are too many settlements. And RFK Jr. knows that.
who was the referee in the Camp David Accords, and Ehud Barak offered the Palestinians everything they wanted, including giving them the entire West Bank, plus like 97% of the West Bank, plus 3% of Israel to make up for the 3% it was keeping. And Yasser Arafat, in the end, and everybody agreed this, Yasser Arafat simply said he wouldn't negotiate. Prince Bandar, all of the people involved in that, Clinton, et cetera, all said it was completely Yasser Arafat's fault that they, and by the way, that there was no negotiation. Yasser Arafat would not negotiate.
So we believe Clinton now?
But for 60 years, the Israelis have been trying to negotiate, and nobody will negotiate. The leadership is bad leadership. Yasser Arafat sold $1 billion from his people. He died a billionaire. His wife is a billionaire. Mahmoud Abbas has $800 or $700 million. Oh, you know, and by the way, after the Oslo Accords, the Oslo Accords gave a right of return to the Palestinians. So any Palestinian in Israel, 1.9 million Palestinians, were allowed to return, and they would be given free land and a farm place in the West Bank. And it was expected that hundreds of thousands, they could live under their own country there. It was expected hundreds of thousands of people would take that offer. You know how many did? 4,000. Why is that? Because nobody wants to live under the Palestinian Authority, because they torture people. There's no justice system. They kill you if they don't agree.
Who's being tortured in the streets right now? Who's being dragged out of their homes? What are you talking about?
With you, and it's a dictatorship, and it's a kleptocracy. They steal everything. They stole $1 billion from their people.
You hear this, the smearing? They steal everything. What's with that rhetoric? As I was listening to this last night, I was thinking to myself, like, I sincerely hope people who don't know anything about this issue do not leave this conversation with a bad view and opinion of Palestinian people. It was disgusting.
I apologize. I have no idea how to push back on you on that, but
I would not have said that. And that's where for me, like if I was Jimmy, you could push back on when he said they steal everything. Like I would have pushed back, like you can't, no, I would not have said that there. And I'm sorry, but this is why he's laughing. This is why RFK Jr. is laughing, because he's like, oh, okay, Jimmy said he can't push back there, so.
I just want, so you would say, let me ask you one more question about this. Like, I think if you could just, anyway. You said Wasserman Schultz has not only refused to condemn the anti-Semitic rhetoric of Rashid Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, but she supported Omar's appointment to the Foreign Relations Committee despite Omar's advocacy of a boycott of Israel. Omar used that platform to issue regular libels against Israel and Jews that include references to Jews and their Benjamins. I won't be lecturing. So when I see that, it's like, oh, well, people call you anti-Semitic incorrectly all the time. And it's just, why wouldn't you be more hesitant? Aren't you doing the same thing here that people do to you?
No, I'm not, because I never said anything anti-Semitic. If she was criticizing Israel, that is not anti-Semitism. Everybody has a right to criticize Israel, just like it's an imperfect democracy.
Everybody has a right to criticize it, but RFK Jr. will never agree with the criticism. He'll come in to defend it.
The only democracy in the Mideast, but it's an imperfect democracy, just like we are. And people ought to criticize it. But if you're applying a different set of standards to Israel than you are every other country, if you let every other country slide on human rights abuses, and and I mean, every country in the Mideast is an apartheid state. They don't let Jews live there. They don't let Jews hold office. They don't let Jews into their legislature.
Live in Iran.
So because other countries are doing it, that makes it okay?
There's temples in Iran.
But there's nobody in political office. It's apartheid.
Oh, okay.
Okay, why aren't they all apartheid? They're apartheid against Jews. The Jews let Palestinians. Israel allows Palestinians to vote, allow them to hold political office. They have the same rights as other Israelis. They even have more rights because they can visit the Temple Mount, and Israelis are not allowed to.
How do you have more rights when your temples are being bombed, when the IDF is coming in shooting people when you're in the temple? How do you have more rights when you're being dragged out of your home? How do you have more rights when they're beating up the fucking kids? How do you have more rights? What rights? Jimmy just told you that Gaza, you can't even move freely. Is that rights? No, man.
They serve on the courts. They participate in the democracy. It's the only place in the Mideast where you can practice freedom of religion, where women have rights, where gays have rights, where there's real democracy.
What rights? See, RFK Jr. is using that same rhetoric as the Democratic Party, real democracy. For who, though? For who? I mean, to me, this is just... I really wish Jimmy would have pushed back here and said something to the point of, well, how do they have these rights if they're being targeted? How do they have these rights if they can't even move freely, in Gaza? How do they have those rights? What do you mean by that? RFK Jr. is like, well, they're allowed to hold political office. So because you're allowed to hold this political office, just ignore the fact that we're killing your people.
And why is she calling that Israel an apartheid state and not saying Jordan, Syria, Egypt, Iran?
So if she did that, you would go, okay, Israel's an apartheid state?
Of course, if she's saying all of them are apartheid state, that's fine.
So you can't just criticize one country, according to RFK Jr. You can't just criticize Israel. You have to criticize other countries. You have to include them in the criticism, according to RFK Jr., or otherwise he's going to say that you're anti-Semitic. How the hell does Jimmy even sit here this long and listen to this line of bullshit? And who made RFK Jr. the lawmaker or the rule maker in reference to how you can criticize Israel, when, where, how, and what you have to include along with that criticism to be considered not to be anti-Semitic? Who made him the rule maker in reference to that? Honey.
But if she only says Israel's an apartheid state, that's anti-Semitism. And calling, talking about Israel's and their Benjamins, that's a little sketchy when you say.
So I just aren't you afraid? Because it breaks my heart in a bit, because it's so great to have a peace candidate, someone who tells the truth about the military industrial complex. No one does that. And you're right about Ukraine, and you're wrong about Russiagate, which led to Ukraine, but you got right about Russiagate, which is a big deal.
But there are candidates that do that, Jimmy. There are candidates that are actual peace candidates, unlike RFK Jr. That's the thing.
And when a dummy like me can see it on day one, what Russiagate was.
I didn't say that, but I wasn't paying attention to it. I was. Right, you were.
Because I saw where it was going to go.
A lot of stuff, so you see it.
And they got their war.
What happened to me is I never looked into it. I was taking the narrative from the mainstream media, and that was it. And then I had dinner one night with Oliver Stone.
Oh boy, he had dinner with Oliver Stone and all this. And no one cares. No one cares about all this. I think I'm going to move on to the next clip because that was pretty much, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next clip here because I want to go back again. So we're going to show this clip where Max Blumenthal said Jimmy is shell-shocked by RFK Jr.'s views on Palestine. This is after RFK Jr. has already exited the interview.
So I thought it was great that you were able to ask him, would he have an exchange with Max Blumenthal? I thought that was terrific, JD.
Yeah, Max is the guy for that. I mean, he was throwing so much bullshit at me. It was just like he was overwhelming me with bullshit stuff. I don't. That's not my wheelhouse. But I know he's 100% wrong on this issue, and I think everybody does. It's like it ruins it.
I think Jimmy needs to give himself more credit though, because Jimmy has covered a lot of these stories. Like Jimmy Dore has covered, like the hospital, the one about the apartment complex, the Palestinian journalists. Like a lot of these stories, Jimmy has covered. Sometimes Max came on, sometimes Aaron came on to talk about it. But he has covered these stories. He's been covering this issue for years, and I think Jimmy needed to give himself more credit and be more strong in reference to the knowledge that he did have. See, that's the thing. Like, you really don't have to be an expert. I'm not an expert at everything, but you take the knowledge that you do have and you use that to your advantage. Most people are not looking for you to know it all. Hell, RFK Jr. he acts like he knows it all, but a lot of those things that he was saying was incorrect. But you take what you do have and you work with that. And I think that's the thing. And never, ever, ever tell the guests that that this isn't your thing or you're not really never do that. Never let them know that, It's
what ruins his candidacy. It doesn't ruin it all the way. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they're not going to let him be the nominee anyway. It's going to be. Wouldn't that be fun if it was Cornel West against RFK and the Republican, the DeSantis or whatever? That would be fun. But it's not. That's not happening. The Democrats are not.
Jimmy, somebody just said this right now. They said,
I told him that the last time we had him on. I said, that's why they have super delegates. It'd have been better if you ran as a Republican. It actually would have been.
And I'm seeing it all over again. And I have to just say this, and I want all of you to be very wary too. It's very easy, to say I'm done with the duopoly. I'm not doing this anymore. And then sometimes all it takes is for the right kind of candidate to come along, someone that really catches your eyes, someone that makes you very excited or whatever, so to speak, someone that may be charismatic, someone like a RFK Jr. to come back around. And then all of a sudden you actually are like, oh, wow, he's running as a Democrat, but this guy is, and I've already seen some people do it. And the thing for me is that when I said I'm done with the two-party system, I meant I was done with all of it. I don't care who comes along. I don't care if Jesus comes down from the sky himself and says, Sabby, I'm running as a Democrat. I'd be like, bye. So that's the thing. There's always going to be one. There's always going to be another one that's going to come, and it's going to come with something else. Maybe next time it won't be anti-war. Maybe it'll be something else that people are kind of squeamish about. And next thing you know, you right back in the Democratic Party. But I think RFK Jr. exposed himself quite a bit on this interview. He's done other interviews as well, but I think he exposed himself quite a bit. But what was really sad was just looking at the live chat last night. I was like, wow, people were not happy in the live chat. People were not happy. Let me finish.
He would have been.
Jimmy, Paul says, thanks for a great job. Isn't it enough that RFK, much like Jimmy, is a decent human being? That's the first hurdle, and I don't see anyone else clearing it. Look at you, Paul.
But I will say, his view on Israel and the Palestine, I would say, I find it odious. It's just so we've covered those stories. You're really going to try to tell me that they don't bomb? They bomb. You can't bomb an open air prison, and that's what that is.
But like what we've said before in interviews is you ask the question and then the person reveals themselves for who they are.
It's so obvious that he's wrong on this issue. It's just, oh my God.
But where some people were upset is the fact that some people saw the video that Jimmy Dore made about the Cornel West interview with Anderson Cooper, where Jimmy said that Cornel West wasn't prepared and that he's not ready. And Jimmy was very upset, like in that video. And then people saw this interview last night and people were like, where's, I don't expect a host to scream at their guests. I don't scream at guests. I don't expect that to happen. But I think where people were kind of upset is because they saw the comparison between the way he reacted in reference to Cornel West and the Anderson Cooper video. And people kind of felt like he was way, way calmer with RFK Jr. Granted, the other one, he wasn't actually interviewing Cornel West, but it seemed, I've seen Jimmy be harsher towards candidates. I was just rewatching the interview that Jimmy Dore did with Andrew Yang. I don't know if you guys remember that when Andrew Yang was running. I was rewatching that interview before I went live. And Jimmy was much harsher when Andrew Yang said, no, he didn't support the increase in the minimum wage. And he was just like, let's just do UBI. Jimmy was much harsher towards him. So I don't know. Maybe there may be somewhat of a soft spot for RFK Jr. Don't know. But I just think I wish he would have gone harder at RFK Jr. I will say that.
A heartbreaker.
SS says, I think a lot of these single issue Palestine zealots are bad faith.
I don't know. It's like, I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know what it is, right? Like, what is it? Why is it that you can stand up to the military industrial complex in Ukraine? You can stand up to the big pharma. You can stand up to the Silicon Valley, and you can stand up to your own party, but you can't stand up to Israel? I don't understand.
Money. I'm sorry, but RFK Jr. knows, I think he knows that he's probably going to not get as much donations if he has the position similar to what Cornel West has in reference to Israel and Palestine. I think that has a lot to do with it. But also in reference to the big pharma thing, I don't even know if I would say, yeah, he really stands up to big pharma because, yeah, in some ways, in reference to, the pandemic, can't say too much about that on here, but in reference to when it comes to just the healthcare system overall, we need a complete overhaul of our healthcare system. And as someone who's been an environmental lawyer, and you've seen the devastation that environmental pollution has brought to some of those communities like Flint, Michigan, right? Then one of the first things that people in those communities are going to need is healthcare. Just like East Palestine, Ohio right now, those people need healthcare. And not everybody has it. Sorry, finish
what that is about. It's a head scratcher for me. Isn't it for everybody?
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is crazy. And I just want to show you what one of those things looks like. A lot of people may not be familiar with this. Israel gave birth control to Ethiopian Jews without their consent. I'm not going to read the entire article. I've covered this story before, but this is the kind of things that have been happening over there. These are the kind of things that have been happening. They were sterilizing Ethiopian women. By the way, they are Jewish. Ethiopian women without their consent. They were giving them the depot shot. The women didn't even know that that's what they were giving them. Things like that. A lot of people bring up the Palestinians, but we leave out that part, right? I think that's important. You can see here, Ethiopian Jews protest racism and discrimination. We really support Israel. These are people who actually supported the community. And you can just see here, there's several examples, guys.
Not religion at issue here, but color. Israel's Ethiopian Jews venting their anger outside the Knesset at what they see as racism in schools, in the workplace, in their homes. The trigger for this latest protest reports that landlords in southern Israel were refusing to accept Ethiopian Jews as tenants.
We really love Israel. We really support Israel, but we want to change the discrimination.
Many complain of prejudice from employers who either don't hire Ethiopians or fail to promote them.
We have a lot of academic that doesn't have work. They work in the garbage, in the gardener, or cleaning the streets.
Some feel a sense of rejection, which has been recognized by the country's opposition leader. Despite receiving a hostile reception, she was determined to voice her support.
It's a legitimate protest. It's an outcry from the bottom of their hearts. It's their right to shout.
It's 3 decades since Israel began rescuing Ethiopia's ancient Jewish community at the height of the famine in the Horn of Africa in the 80s. Israel's 120,000-strong community of Ethiopian Jews are considered descendants of the lost Israelite tribe of Dan. Now members of the younger generation speak Hebrew, serve alongside native Israelis in the armed forces, and study at university. But many still don't feel they've arrived in the promised land.
And one thing that I want to mention too is, again, that's a situation where it's not about the religion. They're Jewish and they love their religion. That's 100% about skin color. Now let's get back to this Max Blumenthal situation. So after that interview, Max Blumenthal tweeted, "Tonight, Jimmy Dore asked RFK Jr. if he would publicly engage with me on Israel-Palestine. RFK Jr. agreed. I look forward to a live civil discussion at the Gray Zone News filled with facts and fact checks if necessary. And Bobby will, of course, get equal time." But is that going to happen? Well, it turns out that Max Blumenthal was actually on Rising this morning to talk about Julian Assange. But Bree actually was able to sneak in that question really quick before he had to scoot and ask him if there was any updates in reference to that interview. I think some of you are not going to be happy with what you hear, but all I'm going to say is, I told you so. I told you they were doing this to certain podcasters. Listen to this.
Ask you about some news that emerged yesterday after RFK Jr. sat down with popular comedian and podcaster Jimmy Dore for a conversation. Many people in the chat seem to want you to talk to him specifically head to head because of their frustration with some of his views on Israel-Palestine. He apparently agreed, and you tweeted that debate is pending. Do you have any more details about when we might be able to look forward to seeing you in a head-to-head exchange with RFK Jr.?
Yeah, I do. So Jimmy asked RFK, he said, I'm not an expert on Israel-Palestine, but a lot of what you're saying about Palestinians being simply a bunch of terrorists and Israel only attacking military targets and Israel just being this beacon of democracy surrounded by enemies doesn't sound true to me. It doesn't ring true. So why don't you debate someone like Max Blumenthal, for example, who has dedicated years of their journalistic career to covering this issue. I've written 2 books, done a documentary on it. I think I'm qualified. I'm at least as qualified as RFK to talk about it. And RFK is someone, I've been sympathetic to his campaign. I sympathize with several planks of his campaign. So it's not as though I'm coming at him in bad faith and that I'm seeking to destroy him on behalf of the Biden administration or some other force. So I think.
Right. Like, I don't think Max is even looking at this as like a debate. He just wants to have the conversation and try to educate him about the issue.
It would be a civil debate. RFK seemed blindsided by Jimmy's question. Jimmy brought up Peter Hotez, the doctor who RFK had been trying to debate, who shied from the debate, and RFK agreed. But what I've heard, I have a source, and I may actually be able to publish this, I'm not sure. But I have a source who spoke to RFK's communications director, Stephanie Spear, and she completely took off the table any possibility of him doing a debate on Israel. This is while RFK's.
Pause. So I hope everyone heard that. And I am familiar with Stephanie Spear. She is the communications director for his campaign. She's the one that sends the emails that say, "You're in the queue, you're in the queue, you're in the queue." And when I spoke to another member of his press team, this conversation was via email and on the phone. I was told recently for a follow-up, I was told that There is a woman who's with him all the time, and she's the one that does the schedule. And it's just difficult to get a sit down with her and scheduled out all these interviews. But I've pushed you up to be priority. By the way, at this point now, fuck it. At this point now, fuck it. So I'm letting all this shit out. I've pushed you up as a higher priority, and I plan to sit down with her hopefully this week. That was about almost 2 weeks ago. Hopefully this week to go ahead and to get something scheduled and on the table. So it is very clear to me that the woman that he's referring to is Stephanie Spear, who is the same woman that Max Blumenthal is referring to. And in other words, guys, she's the gatekeeper. She's the one that's blocking those interviews. She's letting the ones come through where people have a conservative or a libertarian audience, which I told you about this before. And she's letting the ones come through that they're not really going to challenge him tough on this particular issue. And they know that Max Blumenthal knows a lot about this, obviously, and Max Blumenthal is Jewish. So for him to have been in the queue as long as, probably longer than me, that says a lot. And it's not just us two. There have been multiple people that have been dealing with this issue. I'm just going to keep it real with you. I have nothing to hide. Shit. Multiple of us that have dealt with this issue, and we've been told the same thing. And meanwhile, you see him constantly going to like conservative podcasts. He can go on conservative shows all he wants to, but the fact that he has actively been avoiding those shows that have that predominantly left audience, that is very telling, because we're the shows that are more likely to push back against his position in reference to Israel and Palestine. So Max just let you know, it looks like that's not even going to happen, because he has a gatekeeper who has basically decided they're not going to let him talk to anyone about this issue. So that goes to show you that what I've been telling you is correct. We'll go back a little bit for the newbies to let you hear what he said about that.
Of course. So I think it would be a civil debate. RFK seemed blindsided by Jimmy's question. Jimmy brought up Peter Hotez, the doctor who RFK had been trying to debate, who shied from the debate, and RFK agreed. But what I've heard, I have a source, and I may actually be able to publish this, I'm not sure. But I have a source who spoke to RFK's communications director, Stephanie Spear, and she completely took off the table any possibility of him doing a debate on Israel. This is while RFK Jr. is running around with Shmuley Boteach, an operative of the Adelson family, the far-right Likudnik family that funded the Trump operation, named for the late Sheldon Adelson, who called for dropping a nuclear bomb on Iran. He's running around with him going to Israel pride parades and making, in RFK's words, the case for Israel. So I think he should engage with people who sympathize with his campaign in the same way and demonstrate the integrity of his position. But that doesn't, I actually am increasingly pessimistic after what I've heard.
Honestly, at this point, I say fuck him and his campaign. Okay. You don't need to be chasing after people this amount of a time. Like, honestly, like, just let this go. And I want to point out something else really quick in reference to what Due Dissident showed. People were talking about how RFK Jr. was actually up in the polls. There's another poll. I think that was a favorability poll. There's another poll that Due Dissidents brought to my attention. This is from Real Clear Politics. Quick reality check. RFK is down 7 points in the past 90 days, averaging 13.6% in the polls. This is not a campaign with any real momentum beyond online wish casting, which makes it all more ridiculous that people are tying themselves in knots to excuse his Zionism. So if you look at the legend here, Biden is blue, obviously. Kennedy is green and Marianne is yellow. So it has Kennedy at 13.6 and Marianne at 6.0. As you notice over time, he has been just dipping down and down. And if this trend continues, at some point, Marianne and RFK Jr. may actually meet in reference to the polls. So I thought that was really interesting. I thought you guys may want to see that. And then we'd have to call out the super PAC issue. And this is another thing that it's funny to me how all of a sudden all those people who were from the Bernie Sanders movement who said, no, we can't have corporate money in electoral politics. All of a sudden that shit just went right out the window. Now, all of a sudden, when you point out the fact that RFK Jr. has super PACs, all of a sudden it's like, okay, but it's okay because, you know, he's right on Russia and Ukraine. Nah, it ain't okay. Look at who he's getting his money from. Look at this. I said, why are people ignoring he's funded by a super PAC? All the people who said don't take corporate money now seem to be okay with it. That is a problem. And this is coming from Teddy. So Teddy said, here are the two big donors to the super PAC behind RFK Jr. Timothy Mellon, the GOP mega donor, and Gilded Age Scion, who put $5 million in, and Gavin DeBecker, the security consultant, whose most famous client is Jeff Bezos, who donated $4.5 million. And here's the receipts right here. Like, there's Timothy Mellon. There's the donation right there at the bottom. And then if you go to the next receipt, here's Gavin DeBecker. And here's his donation here. And you'll see a donation here. These things are important and you can't ignore this. Where the money come from, it really does matter. That tells you where they're going to stand at the end of the day. And I think we can't ignore that. I don't care how much you like this person. I don't care how charismatic they may be. You cannot ignore the fact that corporate money is involved, because at the end of the day, that is who they are going to serve, not you. But just like that, somebody walk in, kind of charismatic. They're like, yeah, this guy is going to be the one. And it just happens to be a Kennedy. And I watch so many people just throw their morals and their values that they had in reference to progressive politics aside, just because they saw someone and they started to idolize a politician again. Learned absolutely nothing from Bernie Sanders. We got a lot of comments. I have one more story. Eric, I'm going to do half the super chats. We're going to get this update from Richard Wolff, because this is actually good news. And then I'll take a break and I think we'll do call in, because I'm pretty sure people are probably going to want to call in. Thank you, John. Let's organize a national protest against government corruption. We can set out until November to give people time to plan and request off work. That's actually a good idea, John. And thank you for this as well. All I hear is everyone complain, self-included, about the state of things in our system, but we just sit and let it keep happening. It's time to organize. You, DORE, Dave Smith, Rising, Breaking Points all have power to get it started. I do organize. I organize locally. I just did a mutual aid barbecue here in Boston. So I do organize. I can't speak for everybody else. Thank you, Perry, who's a member for 2 months. In 1960s, Africa won its formal independence, but starting now in Niger, Africa will win its real independence. Thank you, Ed. The Bernie plan would leave the expensive private system in place, hospitals, etc. Medicare for all would mainly cut insurance companies. Interesting. LPA says some are so desperate for a savior that they will turn the blind on serious red flags. That's how we end up with the squad. There you go. Thank you, Janice. Public option would be deliberately underfunded to undermine the movement for Medicare for all. It's a trap. Don't fall for it. There you go. And Joy says journalists murdered by the IDF. Yeah, there you go. Let me go on to Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff has really good news. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like button. That helps me with the algo there. But Richard Wolff has great news. And I think sometimes we need some positivity. And this is in reference to the workers. Economic update. We're going to give a shout out here. Let's go ahead and dive in.
I begin with a story that was published in the Boston Globe, the #1 newspaper in the state of Massachusetts, and indeed in much of New England. On the 14th of June, a reporter named Dana Gerber told a story that is old but has some new twists. Here's the old part. As our population ages, there are tens of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses whose owners built them up, usually from modest beginnings, but are now interested in retiring and wondering what to do with their business that has 20 workers or 50 workers or 200 workers that they've gathered as their business has grown. And they confront a really bad choice. They could shut their business down, but they worked a lifetime to build it up. They don't want to. Moreover, it would be catastrophic for all those employees, many of whom they know by name, having hired them. They don't want to do it. They could sell out to another company, but that runs the same risk. The new company could shut the business down, fire the workers, replace them with others, close it down, etc. They don't want to go on become a share company, issue shares on the stock market, again, for the same reason. And they discover, by eliminating everything else, that there's one thing they can do that meets more of their needs: sell the business to the workers in it. They won't close it down because it's their business. It's their job. The community will help because it doesn't want the business to close.
This is so genius and yet so simple, but most people don't do it. And you see this happen a lot of times, especially with smaller businesses where they hit, a rough patch and they're like, we got to just go ahead and just shut it all down. And then everybody has to go look for another job. And there you are, putting yourself at the mercy of another employer to hire you and to give you the benefits that you need. When in actuality, especially depending on the number of workers that are left, you could just sell the business to the workers who are there and in turn create a worker co-op. It's really smart, but a lot of businesses don't do that. They see that they're in the red and they're like, well, this is it. Let me go sell the business, but they end up selling it to a bank, right? Or they let the bank take it, or they foreclose and the bank takes it, or they sell it to another investor and he turns that small business into another Starbucks location. Like, you need another one of those, right? So this is actually genius, but a lot of people just don't do it, unfortunately.
Doesn't want the workers to lose their jobs. It's bad for the whole community. Wow. A basis for better community based on worker co-op businesses is a better solution to older people retiring off of their capitalist businesses than anything else available. And then Dana Gerber points out that the state of Massachusetts has just passed some legislation to enable and facilitate this conversion of capitalist businesses into worker co-ops for the benefit of the workers and the community. In other words, this is a way of showing that capitalism is not the best thing for a society. Something else is.
Yep.
Now, why do I say this? Because here's the basis for a whole new politics in America. A politics of worker co-ops together with a political party, a party for the co-ops, which is busy getting the state to help co-ops grow, to help co-ops replace capitalist enterprises for the security of the jobs, for the benefit of the communities. The co-ops could be the base of such a political party, giving it the votes and the funds to function. And the party could win rules, regulations, and laws that help these co-ops to grow out of.
That makes perfect sense. So he's talking about connecting the worker co-op and have that connecting it to politics, but also have the worker co-op be the base or like the foundation for a political party.
Of that relationship, a whole new politics could develop here in the United States. And you know what it would look like? The politics of an earlier time in America, when capitalism was fighting against old landed interests, feudal landlords, here in the US as well. And they used the government to help capitalism grow out of the shell of the old system. Well, that's what the worker co-ops can do. Build a political party or help do it that will make the transition easier, quicker for these co-ops. They need technical help. They need better laws. They need capital. Just this week, I read about the U.S. government making a $9 billion loan to the Ford Motor Company at below market interest rates. The Ford Motor Company can pay market interest rates. It's one of the biggest, richest companies in the world. Why is the government subsidizing them? And that's the same government that is nickel and diming food stamp recipients, making them work more hours to get their food stamp. Who gets subsidized? Who gets penalized?
That's right. And they always jump in to protect and help the corporations when needs be. They always do. You know, we watch them bail out the banks. We've watched them bail out. I think it was General Motors was bailed out before as well. I think that happened under Obama. General Motors was bailed out. We watch them bail out like corporations, but they just don't bail out the people. So again, and I know we've talked about this multiple times before on the show, but again, this is a push for worker co-ops. And I think we need to talk about this more. Look at what's happening with the unions. Look at what's happening with UPS, with the employees. We talked to them at the labor organizing summit at RBN, and you notice the employees, what did they say? They said they don't want to accept this agreement. They said they do want to go on strike. Oftentimes, when the union members want something, unfortunately, union management doesn't always bring those asks to the table when it comes time for agreement. And oftentimes, union members aren't even offered a seat at the table. How much power do they really have? It seems like most of the power goes to the union management. And some of those union managers make a lot of money, more so than the workers do. But when you transition into worker co-ops, now you're giving the workers a little bit more power, because now all the workers own a piece of the company. So I'm not here to say that unions are bad. I'm not one of those people that thinks they're bad. But I do think that unions should be the first step. And I think the ultimate goal should be worker co-ops, so that you can own part of the company. As long as you are under someone else's thumb, how many rights do you really have? And we've seen it, even if you do go on strike, depending on what industry you work in, we've seen the federal government step in and stop the strike. Congress has done this. The president has done this. So I like listening to Economic Update, because Richard Wolff gets you to think beyond what is possible and to try to fight for something better, I think. And I think that's really important. And I thought this was a good feel-good story, because yes, instead of selling your business, your small business, to the bank or to another investor, they're just going to tear it down and make it something, hoity-toity, frou-frou, like juice bar or something anyway. Why not just sell it to the workers, the people who are actually working there? That way you still get to keep it. Something to think about. Something to think about. But yeah, I think I'm gonna finish up here. Sorry.
I want to shout out to the International Longshoremen and Warehousemen's Union on the West Coast. They struck the West Coast ports earlier this year. They did it after having waited almost a year while the companies didn't come across in negotiations. The old contract had expired a year ago, July 2022. And here we are coming on July 2023. Well, when they stopped talking and stopped the business from happening, wow, everything changed. They got a new contract. The strike is over. It's a 6-year contract, but it goes back retroactive to last year. So it's the last year plus 5 years. The workers got, ready, 32% increase in their salary across this 6-year contract. So I want to celebrate. That's a lot more than most other working people have been able to get or are likely to get. And it's because this union has a long history of walking off the job. When they sit down with the employer knows you don't come across to a reasonable compromise, we will strike you, and then you won't get any profit at all. They tried them, they tested them, they went on strike, 32%. While it's an amazing victory and an amazing achievement to get a 32% increase in your salary, let's be clear. If we have the same rate of inflation over the next 6 years, 5% a year, that we currently have, this 32% will mean they can't afford to buy any more 6 years from now with 32% more than they can buy right now.
That is very, very true. And something to think about. And that's why, like Professor Wolff, he does talk about worker co-ops a lot, because he does want people to understand that, like, look, I'm all for unionization, but let's talk about some of the things that happen, right, with these unions. So, but yeah, a little bit of good news for you guys there. Eric, I think I'm going to do call in. You guys want to do call in? I'll do call in for a little bit. I can't do a long call in. So I just need a little bit of a break. And Eric, I'm sorry, but I think there's like 29 super chats. I'm so sorry.
They always want call in. All right. She will be back. This is where we give our Sabrina a break, and we're going to read off some of these chats. I think I got them all. They're apologies if we miss any of the super chats. They're we had a lot. This was definitely a record night for super chats and chats. And quite an interesting segment will be. And so we want to hear what you think in the call-in. Sabrina is going to be setting up the room. Hopefully, the call-in app will behave for her this time, and then we'll be posting the link. Hey, Saul. Hey, Lawrence. I see you there in the chat. Hope everybody's having fun on our Tuesday night. We'll be having a link for you that you can get in to do call in, and somebody said cute pic of maybe that's the cat. Oh no, oh yeah, that's the turkey. Yes, we got good artwork around here. I know the artist very well, and it's calling. We'll be giving you a link, or you can install the Call-In social podcasting app on your phone, and you can tell us what you think about any of the topics tonight. Let's see what came in on the super chats. And again, I think we got almost all of them, but if we miss any, apologies, but we got a lot of them. Thanks for this, Marvin Vargas, 2-year-old Tamini shot and killed in the head by the IDF. I remember one of the things when RFK first started making these statements about Israel-Palestine is I put up a tweet with a picture of Shireen, the reporter that they murdered, just on the ground, that heartbreaking picture. And I just said, this is what RFK Jr. supports. Thanks for this super chat, Leon. Terrorist, AKA troublemaker, obviously. Thanks for that. And thanks, Dr. Nick Rivera. I don't have Twitter at Sabby, name and shame. Oh, I think he wanted to have some names named. Well, you're going to have to check out Twitter if you want to see some of the names around that drama, but it was all over Twitter, but it wasn't anybody you'd know or anything anyways. Thanks for this one, Space 99 Yak. I wish the left cared 1/100th about the genocide and apartheid of Native Americans on the soil they live on as they do Palestinians. BLM, Stop Asian Hate, Latinos, Muslims versus Trump, 0 on the natives. Thanks for that. Thanks for the super sticker, $6.99. Top JJ, we appreciate that. Thanks for the super chat, Mary Ebony Collins. I can see this one issue Jimmy couldn't get him on. I can see Jimmy isn't versed in what is going on with Israel and Palestine. Sad. Thanks for that. And thanks for this one, Dr. Nick. Keeping it real, Sabby. HLM is my spirit channel, but at Sabby Sabs, it be my true north. Thanks for that. And thanks for this one, Marvin Vargas. Israel support trained cops, military apartheid, South Africa. Thanks for that. Yeah, there's that whole thing of this is real connection between Israel and their defense forces and police forces in the United States. And that's a disturbing connection, that's for sure. Thanks for this one, Dr. Nick. Were they given their former homes, the Palestinians, after the JOO took them? I'm not sure the answer to that, Thanks, Dr. Nick. And thanks for this one, this super chat, Mr. Methuselah. Kennedy is using the same excuses that apartheid South Africa and the West used to justify that government. Very true. And thanks for this one, Yanina. Once again, he won't talk about my Black Hebrew Israelite family who have been there for 50 years, who they won't give citizenship to, the Black people who came from America in 1971. Rachel Corey, you're all. Thanks for that one. And yeah, we had this one in the queue from Maxine. JD has been covering this for years. It's kind of unbelievable that he couldn't push back harder. I know that sentiment was certainly out there. And thanks for the super chat, Mr. Methuselah. With RFK, it's about his feelings versus the facts. Do people really know this guy? He's a warmonger. Thanks for this super chat, Janice Anderson. Everything he said about Palestinians is anti-Semitic, as they are one of the Semitic peoples. He is a raging anti-Semite. And thanks for this one, Goba44. We need the DNC to cut block RFK, then let Demented Joe debate Cornel West. That's the game plan. This guy is dangerous. Thanks also for this one, Yanina. Also, WEF Pritzker is going to make undocumented immigrants police officers here in Illinois, and sheriffs. Law-abiding citizens are in danger. Help. And thanks for this one, Mr. Methuselah. Jimmy did an excellent job. He gave RFK enough rope for him to expose and hang himself. And I mean, Corey and I were kind of talking about these ones and kind of going back and forth on them, on things with it. And one of the things that we agreed on was, you know, no matter how good or bad or job Jimmy did on it, I mean, this is like kind of a win for kind of what you'd call our side that has a real problem with what Israel is doing, because no matter how it was done or what else happened, I mean, RFK really exposed himself and really just said, you know, said a lot of stuff. And I think it really hurt his campaign personally. Thanks for this super chat, Leon Scott. He's using Israel lobby to lobby the DNC into a debate. Well, that's an interesting angle. And thanks for this one as well, Yanina. So what you're telling me is that I was chemically sterilized as a 12-year-old child when I was put on the Depo-Provera shot that I took until I was 17 years old. Everything looks fine physically. Thanks for that one. And thanks for this super chat, Space Yak 99. Don't let Max fool you. He says he care about genocide and apartheid, but ignore it on his own soil. That allowed his family wealth has ignored me repeatedly. Well, apparently, yeah. And thanks for this one, Mr. Methuselah. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. Yeah, I think we might have had a bit of that from RFK. Thanks for that one. Thanks for this, Roger Meadows. Oh, you're doing the story mass right of first refusal law. Yes, Roger, we did that one. And thanks for this very generous super chat, Stephen R. Jimmy did not need to say another word. RFK exposed on Israel. Thanks to truly dependent voices like Jimmy, Max, and Sabrina. Keep up the great work. And thanks for that super chat. And thanks for this very generous super chat, Landrew. No vote on RFK Jr. West 24. Thank you for educating Sabby. RFK Jr. is a liar. Thanks for that very generous chat, Landrew. And Mr. Methuselah coming in with Kennedy is the COINTELPRO candidate. He's worth over $50 million. He supports Empire. West is getting my votes. Where am I here? Okay. Thanks for that one, Mr. Methuselah. Sometimes we got a lot of chat. We're getting near the end. Thanks for this one, Leon Scott. He knows all this stuff, but has never seen the videos. Yep, that was pretty sus. Thanks for this one, Dogs for the Win. So Jimmy should lie about being out of his depth on the topic or not probe the topic of Israel with RFK. And thanks for this one, Kyle. This interview drove me effing nuts, Sabby. Jimmy screamed at Cornel for that trash in CNN and then did the exact same thing on his own damn show. Two more in the YouTube queue. DC, the Six-Day War was preemptive violence instigated by Israel with the help of RFK Sr. Israel stole land from Palestine, Egypt, and Syria. Free Sirhan. And we also had in the queue new member Cameron Jones. All right, I think we got
all right.
Super chats. Let me clear that out. Let me. We do have Rockfin. Do you want to do the Rockfin?
Yeah.
All right. Let me.
Cool. We'll do Rockfin and then we'll head on over to call-in. So I've already posted that link to the top of the chat. Thank you, Roger. He told Math Hoffa at his Harlem barbershop that we shouldn't get direct cash payments because business loans instead. How are you going to loan me when you owe me? Then says, well, you getting reparations. How you think that make Native Americans feel? Glad brother with the locks pushed back. Yeah, I saw that interview. If you guys haven't seen it, watch that interview, Math Hoffa with RFK Jr. Oh, you don't know enough? Here, let me educate you then. Uh-oh, no, wait. Shmuley, help me. Come save me. This Irish Catholic thinks the Jewish guy is not objective about Israel. If I don't know any better, it sounds like the beginning of a joke. The NYPD is trained by Israeli forces. I was telling people this. That's where the police get their training from. Well said there, Roger. Thank you, Hemp Carr, for the tip. So many lies and Bill Kristol sounding talking points from RFK Jr. For one, killing Palestinians is anti-Semitic. They too are Semitic peoples. And Zionism was literally voted as a form of racism in a UN landslide vote and threat to world peace. What about the schoolgirl the IDF emptied a clip into? Yep. Or Rachel Corrie. The real Malala Yousafzai and Tank Woman, except China didn't run him over. There you go. Thank you for this as well. Scribed, but a paywall on this leaflet. I have printed off and will have it to post somewhere for free. But if RFK Jr. was to read these facts and the MSM primary source citation included with it directly under it that a control F search can find, I think he'd soon get embarrassed and say, I get the point. Now let you read it and say, but blah, blah, blah. Thank you so much for that. All right.
And I wanted to make one prediction here. I don't think RFK is going to debate Max Blumenthal, but I think what is going to happen is Max and maybe Aaron are going to go on Jimmy's show, and then they're going to have some things to say. So watch out for that.
I think if that debate happens, it'll be because there's been a public outcry about it, because Max has spoken publicly about what his campaign is doing. And I told you guys they were doing this stuff. This is what I was trying to tell you, but I was told by his friend, no, it's not like that at all. Bullshit. I have emails. I have receipts. I knew exactly what was happening. So I'm glad that Max said that on Rising so more people can hear it. It's one thing not to come on this show. My show is not as big, but for you to actively avoid the gray zone that has hundreds of thousands of subscribers because you don't want to talk about this, your campaign doesn't want you to talk about this issue with people who are Jewish and have been there and have reported about this multiple times, that says a lot. That right there tells me a lot. You can't have this conversation, but you want to be on the debate stage with Joe Biden. Get out of here, man. Miss me with that. All right.
Tell us what you think in the call-in. See you in there.
Yes, let's go on over to call-in. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. Episode 119, Jimmy's RFK Jr. interview. Let's chat. So that link should be pinned there. You guys should see. Yeah, it is pinned there at the top of the live chat. Let's go ahead and head on over there. You guys know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.